Could we ask any of the club representatives that are turning up to sign in on the chat, please, just so we've got a list of everyone who's here.
How do we do that?
Just go down to chat.
To chat and then sign in, I suppose.
Yeah, just put your name and club. I know what your name and club is, but
yes,
there may be others.
Something I can't escape. Just put your name in, or do we have to press something?
Yeah, probably enter or something. That you're in.
Pete.
Howdy, how are you?
I'm not sure who had all the background noise, but I've just muted everyone. But you can unmute yourself if you so wish. For those just coming in, I've put everyone on mute for now, but if you could sign in on the chat, please, just put your name and club if you haven't already done so. I've only got 8 messages, I think, on the chat. We've got about 20 odd people in already. Okay, we're at 7:30. We've got 21 in. 50 of those are committee, but I'll just sort of run through the basics. As I say, I'll put everyone on mute for the moment, just to save you from the feedback and from everyone else's TV noise. But obviously, if you'd like to say something, you will need to unmute yourself. We have a sort of agenda of points that we'd like to get feedback on, but we'd also be more than happy to hear anything that you would like to talk about. If I can see everyone on one screen at the moment, so you can kind of wave at the screen, or you can raise a hand digitally or stick a message in the chat to say, got a point I'd like to make, please, whatever suits. The point of this evening is not for us to talk at you, it's for you to talk to us. Tell us what you think. We'll ask you some questions and try and get your feedback on certain aspects of the league. If we don't raise it, that doesn't mean we don't want to talk about it. It just means we didn't think of it. So please feel free to bring up anything you want to. I've put this in an order whereby I've kept the meaty stuff to the back end, so that we can make sure we get as many points dealt with as we possibly can. So that the stuff you probably is at the front of your mind might be coming a little bit later. Don't despair, it will come out. I'd like to start just with getting some general feedback on how the clubs felt the season went. You know, we put together 2 leagues over the COVID summer. We did it in a relatively short space of time. The first approach to the OCA committee was kind of in the middle of last season. So we just want to find out if anybody thought it was a terrible idea, thought it was a great idea, happy, not happy. I've broken it down into 4, but again, it can be more than that if there's anything else you want to talk about. But communication, organisation, the website, and availability of documentation and rules. And I've got more reasons to put in that one, but we'll come to that. So who wants to be brave and kick off? Or should we just assume that you all thought it was great and move on to that too? Anyone?
I don't mind saying a bit, Ian.
Go there, Mikey.
Yeah, I think it was a really positive move. I thought it was well organised, well discussed. It was obviously voted in, and it was all done properly. Everyone seemed to react really well to it. Obviously, from Brackley's perspective, everyone's really happy. Everyone was happy in the second team having more local games. I think there was any real criticisms at all that came out of it from our perspective. So yeah, everyone was really happy from Brackley. So yeah, well done. It was well organised.
Cool. Thank you. Ian.
Ian Houseman from Chisley. I think you did a very good job getting the 2 leagues together, and it was a mammoth effort on your part, but very worthwhile. I hope the OCA teams feel welcome. I'd be interested to hear a few views from them. But from our point of view, it meant quite a bit less travelling, and it all went well.
Excellent. We've got a few ex-OCA clubs on, as well as a few ex-OCA committee members. Any feedback, thoughts from there? Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I've played in the OCA for years, and I have to say it's one of the most enjoyable seasons I can remember, and hats off to all the committee for their organisation. It didn't feel like the first season of 2 huge organisations having merged. I think everything went pretty smoothly. I was always pretty realistic. There would be, a few kind of teething issues, because you're never going to put 2 big things, 2 businesses or organisations together and get everything right from day one. So I think there's a few things to be honed, but in general, really positive. So thanks to everyone concerned.
Yeah, I'd second that. So it's Martin here from Cairns Fudge. Certainly from an organisation point of view, but also the point was made previously about feeling welcome, certainly made to feel welcome both by the league and the opposition teams that we faced. It may be a parochial observation, but I kind of sensed that the kind of legacy Cherwell teams were just that little bit more serious and professional, maybe in their kind of prevailing outlook on the game and the formats and all the rest. But that's only just a subtle observation. What was definitely evident was that they were more used to the playing rules and the kind of how to approach the format and how to bowl the line and how not to bowl leg side wides and all the rest. But to be honest, it's been an interesting kind of learning experience from our point of view, and yeah, definitely made to feel welcome. And yeah, was it, apart from the rain, it was enjoyable.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah.
I'll make a point follow up to that. I was in a division where we had a split of OCA teams and Cherwell teams, and I think without exception, every OCA team or ex-OCA team stayed for a drink afterwards and a beer. And I think pretty much the Cherwell League teams didn't. And actually, we stayed where we could, again with the ex-OCA teams for a beer as well. And actually, that was something that was good to have back again, because I think we played for a few years where the opposition just disappear as the game's over, and it was really nice not to have that and to have a drink with the opposition on every occasion. At the beginning of the season when we stood outside in the cold with the rain, and obviously later in the season when it was a bit warmer. But that, I think without exception, all the ex-OCA teams stayed, or we were welcome to stay for a beer, which actually, I know it's league cricket, but that actually made it far more fun and a far more enjoyable day.
Hi, it's Justin from Challow here. Can I sort of add to what Gary's just said? Having played in some of the teams that were in divisions that didn't have any OCA teams, but also played in teams where we did, I think it does make a difference that having the local teams, which was a huge benefit to our club, having a regionalisations in those lower divisions, it encourages people to stay after the game and have a drink, because you haven't got to travel an hour to get back. I mean, travelling has always been a big deal for our club because we're obviously in the bottom corner of the league, but certainly playing a lot more local games, we do stay behind to have drinks, whether we're playing away or the opposition coming to us, because we've only got perhaps 15-20 minutes to travel after the game. I think that has been perhaps an unforeseen benefit of having these regionalised lower leagues.
Okay. Cool. I feel like we're just patting ourselves on the back here and asking for compliments, but if anybody's got if anyone has a constructive observation the other way, I'm happy to hear that as well. Or do we want to move on to slightly more detailed bits?
Ian, if I could just ask, it was mentioned that by somebody a bit early on that they thought there are a few small kind of teething issues, which are probably things in the first year maybe, but can we kind of elaborate on that a little bit? Just to kind of try and see, what we've got in the existing kind of workings of the league that we might want to just be maybe having a look at.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't remember if it was Martin or was it Stuart who mentioned he thought there were a few teething issues. I can't remember who it was who asked.
Yeah, it was me, Jim. I think they're on the agenda anyway, though. I mean, from my point of view, they were probably win, draw, lose and umpires, which I think are on the agenda anyway, so I didn't go into any detail.
Okay.
Okay, so well, that kind of dovetails into that. My agenda is a bit expanded from the one I sent you, just because a few clubs had sent in some things that they would like to discuss. So that dovetails in quite nicely to regionalisation. There have been a few comments that I've had quite a lot of communication with a lot of you, and quite often had comments about regionalisation, and they've all been positive. But it has been raised by a couple of people. Do we want more of it? Which I think logistically is quite difficult. It has also been raised that perhaps we should have less of it, because one or two people have commented that they felt they're pigeonholed with a certain group of clubs and that they're never going to get to play anyone else. Or do we think where we are is about right? I'm interested to get some now clearly this is much less of an issue if you're playing your cricket in tiers 4 and 3. But once you get down to 5, where we're divided into 3 tiers, and there's no set design on it. We put the 30 clubs in, and then we draw the best 2 lines to create the regions. Any thoughts on more? Let's do it. So you're on mute now.
Yeah, just one thought on that. I guess that's can be more of an issue perhaps for clubs on the periphery of the region, but with some creative positioning of teams, there's quite a lot of teams in the middle of the region who could probably play in any one of the 3 divisions, possibly. So, if there was a situation where it ended up 8 of the 10 teams were the same as they were the season before, I think you probably could shift it around a little bit within the tier. I know it's a bit more work for whoever does the fixtures. I think is Gary, but I think some of the teams can fit into more than one division within a tier. That's my point.
Yeah, and I think Ian's already sort of started looking at that with the maps and where we think with promotion stuff, and there may be some shuffling around. I think that'd be quite good. And I, ironically, was in a division where we still had to go as far as Wantage, where they stayed for a beer up, but we still went to West Ilsley. But equally had Aston Rowan at the bottom of the hill. So I think as teams go up and down, we will look at what's the best geography. So it may be that if you're in 5A, you might be in 5B next year, but geographically that might be better. And I think that's good because that does give us the scope to play a lot more teams. One of the things about the 10 in the line, which we had before, was in theory you could play any one of the other clubs in the league. And if the divisions always remain parallel, actually that won't be the case. So I'm hoping that we'll shuffle it around as enough. It doesn't make a great deal of difference if you start the fixtures from scratch each year. So from a sort of doing the fixtures point of view, it doesn't make a difference. Unless, of course, we end up with lots of teams who share grounds or have particular requests for home games, away games at different times of the year, all in the same division, which will make life more complicated. But generally, I think, if you're in level 5, then and you haven't got promoted or relegated, you'll still be in level 5, but you might be in a different A, B, or C if that geographically that works out better. And obviously, as teams come in, the geography will change as well.
Yeah, and the first look at the lower tiers for this year, several of them will naturally change geographically. So whereas 6C, for example, was kind of south and east, it's now a little bit more north and east, and some clubs that were in 6C are now going to be in 6B just because the geography fits. I think Dave's point is that we can also look at it and go, well, actually, that one's as long as it's broad, let's swap them around and keep it fresh, give it some more teams to play at. John. You're muted.
I'm just sort of chewing over as you say this, whether, given your example, it's tier 6 and there's 3, they're all supposed to be on the same level, whether by moving clubs around between A, B, and C could in some way favour or do a bad turn to teams. I appreciate they're all on level 6. I'm just trying to chew over whether we could be favouring the geography over the cricket in some way. And I'm not quite sure how, but it just strikes me there should be a brief discussion on this. I don't know whether, in region C, they might happen to be very much stronger than those in region A, or for example.
Yeah, I think after 1 year, that's quite hard to tell. And obviously it was completely geographically based on finishing positions from 2019 this year. And there were some strong teams in all the divisions, I think. Well, I think we need to bear it in mind. We don't want to move the bottom 3 teams from one division to play the top 8 teams or 7 teams from another one, because that probably isn't right. But at the moment, I think most clubs are still finding their true level, probably.
I think that's the issue. This is the first season. I think that there's the intention to allow teams to progress up and down as much as possible to find their own levels.
Yeah.
And maybe after 3, 4, 5 seasons or whatever, and people are bored of playing the same teams, maybe then there's some sort of impetus to move you sideways within a tier. But I think, as John has just mentioned, it might be nice to sort of consult with the club and say, would you like your team moved across the tier, rather than necessarily having it sort of presented upon them. They may feel that it's beneficial, or might have a different view on whether geographically it's any better or not before that happens.
For me, it kind of can't be considered in isolation of all of the other major points that affect the length of the day. So the length of the day as a whole is the single biggest factor on the marginal kind of recruitment issues where people decide to play or decide that they can't commit for that long. So things like, if in the future we reintroduce tea, then maybe people would be less inclined to commute further for a game. Similarly, the format in the different divisions. And the over rates that are produced on the day. So all of the significant kind of contributing factors to how long the day takes in total probably has an effect on how willing people are to commute a long distance for the game, I would think. And I'm speaking obviously from the point of view of a club that runs one team and doesn't always get 11 players, which I realise is not all of the clubs represented here, but that's how it is for us.
I think in essence, it's okay to move within regions if it's sensible to do so, as long as that doesn't affect promotion or relegation. So in other words, if a team has earned promotion, it shouldn't in any way lose out for some regional reason. I guess you probably would accept that too. The other just interesting point I'd throw open to everybody, this is a very personal Bledlow Ridge thing, because I get frustrated about some people who say I can play home only, in particular after the league has done very well really to regionalise things. So I tell you that as of next season, when we see whatever regions or whatever teams we will be playing against, I will be announcing, for example, that if you are home only for Bledlow Ridge, that will include clubs like Kimble and Aston Rowan, in order to, to prevent people who have a 10-minute drive instead of a 5-minute drive, saying they can only play one venue. I just throw that out as something that might be helpful to all clubs.
Okay.
Yeah, Ian, I think the other consideration is that the wider picture is the amount of travelling. Carbon neutral and all that. The league is doing its best to cut down the amount of travelling. I think we have to stick with that as well as we can.
Okay.
I also think when it comes to the latter end of the season, we were quite lucky from Chalgrove that we played Long Marston and things earlier in the season. If you start at 12 o'clock or 12:30 and you've got an hour's travel to get to the ground, that makes it really difficult as well for people who work Saturdays, and you get that longer day. So we were quite lucky we played them earlier in the season rather than end of the season. But again, it must make similar scenarios for every club if they got an hour's travel.
It does, and one of the issues we looked at in the initial plan of regionalisation was going to 4 regions, because at that point you cut down all of the long trips, but we just don't have the density of clubs and teams to make that viable. We've got clubs that are kind of outriders, like Long Marston at one end, Challow at another end, Cropredy on one foot, and in fact ourselves at Bledlow Ridge, mark out at the 4 corners. But we're probably 40 or 50 teams short of the kind of density that would allow us to break it down any further than it is at the moment, and really cut it down to walking distance to everybody. Okay, anything else on John?
Just me again. I'm just thinking, I presume that if if we revert to less strict to the COVID rules next year, we'll probably be all our overs at the required speed. I suspect in some games, half an hour has been lost due to just generally bowling over slowly and long drinks breaks this year. I don't know what other clubs think. And I was just wondering whether it's possible to put back start times by half an hour in the future on the basis that we will be having to comply with what's written in the rule book about overrates again.
It's a good point. It's a good point. Overrates has been a problem in the games we've played. When teams spent 3 hours, 40 minutes bowling 53 overs against us, and whilst the umpires did their best, it wasn't the greatest. But it is a problem, but I see it both sides. If you put the start time back, that upsets people who work on a Saturday morning. It wouldn't probably affect our club that much, but it would affect a lot of others. So I do accept that there's arguments on both sides.
I meant by putting it back, if we are going to be stricter over the overrates, couldn't we start at 1 o'clock instead of 12:30?
Massively out of favour with that, given every game we have is a minimum of half an hour unless we play Long Marston or Leighton Buzzard. I know what you're saying.
So is it the journey back that you're unhappy with, the late journey back?
It just means that people can't go out on a Saturday evening because most away games, if we play in Oxford, you're not getting home till 9 o'clock if you start any later than 12:30, and that would be a real no-no for our club, a Great Brickhill. Our nearest games, we've got about 3 or 4 local teams. After that, it's half an hour minimum, an hour for most of them. Even in a regional league, it's an hour to Oxford.
Well, also, John, the timings for win-lose for the 100-over game at 12:30 till 7:30. If we started at 1, we'd be aiming to finish at 8. And I just think that's much too late. And we know from experience that we can't do it quicker than that because of all the wides people bowl.
I was just going to pick up on that point. I totally agree with Nielsen. I'm sat here 5 to 8, looking outside, and it's almost dark.
I would echo as what's just been said as well. Having talked to players around, they would prefer the start times to come earlier, not later. They would prefer their spare time on their Saturday to be after the match in the evening, to have a drink, to go out, whatever, have some kind of social life rather than on Saturday morning. Now I know that affects people who work Saturday mornings, but that was the view we had from us.
Yeah, I strongly second that as representing many views that I've heard in my own club and at other clubs. I'm sure there are contrary views the other way, but I think the majority would be to start earlier rather than later.
I think we'd echo that at Bicester as well.
I don't particularly mind either way. It's just an idea I was throwing out there.
Yeah, I think the earliest starts become a problem when you still do have a distance to go and you've got people who are preparing the home ground or anything else. I mean, that's certainly a problem we face, is that the groundsman would like to be playing or umpiring on a Saturday afternoon and has to do the ground as well.
What's the earliest that's ever been proposed or that you would consider out of interest when you've discussed it before?
We've not really gone beyond 12 o'clock. And that was just for 100 over games in the last 2 weeks. We have said in the past that if a club contacts us and says we'd like to start at 11:30 and we've spoken to the opposition and they're happy to start at 11:30, we're not going to get an objection from us. Knock yourself out if that suits everybody, then off you go.
Would you consider a proposal of midday for the whole season, or no?
I'd be happy to float it around these forums. And
just based on the majority of sentiment we've heard on this call, it feels like they'd have some weight behind it.
It's certainly something we'll push around. The purpose of these forums is for us to get not a consensus, a swell of opinion. Sure. And if we come out thinking, well, everybody's saying they want to start at 12, then we'll put that in as a proposal for the AGM, because and then all the clubs have the opportunity to vote on it.
Yeah.
Particularly for the sort of ex-OCA clubs on here, a few years ago now, I can't remember exactly how many, we actually proposed at an AGM that start times could be flexible as long as both teams agreed. And bizarrely, it was thrown out at the AGM. So we said, you can start at 12 if both teams agree, or you can start at 2 o'clock if both teams agree. But if you can't agree, you start at the set time, which was 12:30 or 1, and it was thrown out as proposal. I'm still mystified as to why it was thrown out, but we have tried to be flexible in the past, sadly without any success.
I said earlier I don't have a particularly strong opinion either way, but I wouldn't like it to come earlier. I say that as somebody who generally gets down to a home match very early on a Saturday if the weather is not so good, and it's easy to forget when we get later on in the season and the weather's generally better. That certain matches, and I can quote our club, and I'm sure you guys have had the same, where you struggle to get a game on because the weather's been dreadful overnight, but you've somehow done a lot of work in the morning to do so. To have to get a ground ready at 12 o'clock after some of the weather conditions we had in May, it would be very, very difficult. Every half an hour counts. I could quote examples that wouldn't really be of much interest to people here. I think if you go early and have a bad summer, you're going to have more games rain affected, particularly as weather generally, if anything, gets better as the day goes on.
Yeah, unless we just increase the window. Instead, start the games at 12, but we've added more spare time on the back
then
end.
That kind of defeat, then potentially they're longer, aren't we?
Well, not if they do start at 12, but if they're, it gives you some, in that scenario, it gives you some space to deal with the delay.
Yeah, I personally think it should be seriously considered. It's obviously the point where some folks on this call have been the most animated, so it suggests that there's a strength of feeling about it.
I think there's personally, I'd make a deadline of getting to a ground at 9 o'clock to get a game on rather than 4 to 8:30. I think you should look at the games that have been abandoned that maybe could have been got on if or wouldn't.
The problem from the umpiring point of view is players start complaining after they've been off the field for half an hour about why the game hasn't been abandoned yet. And if we're going to start early so we could play longer, then the cut-off time is even later, so they're going to be even more miserable.
Yeah, I mean, I know there is some regionalisation, but to put it in perspective, if we had a 12 o'clock start in some of our games this season, we'd have to be leaving for an away game realistically by about 10 o'clock in the morning.
Gary, is that a problem if you're committing your day to playing cricket? I mean, I'd rather be home earlier in the evening than I would. But a lot of players, I accept the argument about players, you know, wanting to, you know, who work on a Saturday morning. There's a lot of players who want to go out on a Saturday night. I think there's as many who want to go out on a Saturday night as there are who work on a Saturday morning.
They probably are, and that's why I think we've probably got the balance about right at the moment.
Yeah, but we're a club on the absolute edge of the region at Brickhill, and we regularly get to grounds. And our meet time is an hour and 15 minutes before the start time. So we're at 11:15 for an away game in Oxford. So we're leaving at 10:15 anyway. But that's our choice. But you know, what I'm saying is I don't think it's going to make a massive difference to us if we do start earlier. If anything, I think it'd be positive. And listening to one or two of the people comment tonight, that seems to be something they would prefer too.
I think that those people with young families, I think the time matters on a Saturday morning. And it may be that the youngsters want to get back and have a good night out on the town, but it's not quite so easy for people with young families. And we have a lot of those. And sometimes it's quite a struggle to get them to play. And these are good players. If you start talking about 12 o'clock, 11:30 starts, I'd certainly say we'll lose some of them. And I think it make it difficult for people with young families all the way across the league.
Yeah, ironically, I suspect we'd lose some bar takers as well because we would be finished and people would leave.
I think what we've got is enough to suggest that we need to bring it up again. I'm adding to the agenda now for the next meeting to get a consensus on this. We are recording all of these meetings, so if you want to, if you really have got that much time, you'll be able to log on to YouTube, go on and look and see what everyone else was saying as well, give you an idea of what the consensus was. And as I say, if we get a groundswell in one direction or the other, or in this instance, it's possible we'll get a groundswell for both, for earlier, for later. So maybe the solution is a more flexible start time again, and say, well, if clubs can agree it, then early starts, late starts are fine, and we can set a window. But I'll make sure that this goes in and that we get some more input onto it, which, as I say, you'll be able to see, and there'll be minutes put together. Ian, you've got a digital hand up. Ian Rowe.
Yep, sorry, with the camera on. Yeah, the problem with the flexible start times is you've not got an even playing field then, have you? And if some clubs see that weather's coming in later on, they agree to start earlier. That gives them an advantage over a club that can't start earlier because their players are working in the morning, etc. So the flexibility with start time is a unbalances things to a certain extent.
It is, but I'm sure the people on this call would agree that the weather in Challow is quite often different from the weather in Brackley at the same time of the day. Particularly, I mean, we're in the east. And we quite often get rain much later. So the games the other side of Oxford are rained off way before ours. So we often get games finished. So, we're spread over such geography that I'm not sure that geography doesn't play a bigger part than the start time in whether it rains or not.
Yeah, I don't think weather comes into it because it's so unpredictable, literally from about a mile away. It can be different. So I don't think weather is an issue on a start time. It's interesting at Hawley, we would welcome, I think, the earliest half-hour start, and we've never had any issues with weeks 17 and 18 at all. That's just our club.
Okay, guys, I'm going to move it on a little bit because there's a lot of things I want to talk about. We've certainly got some opinion here, and it certainly merits further discussion. Right, balls. Let's talk about cricket balls. Now, we have a few ex-OCA clubs who were using Hamptons last year. In the lower divisions this year, the Hampton was an option for the Buckingham. And in the higher divisions, it was the Buckingham. I had a phone call from Tiflex literally yesterday. They want to start talking to us about renegotiating the contract and so on. I said, you'll need to go away and come back in 2 weeks because I want to hear what clubs have got to say. So what do we think about cricket balls?
Ian, can I quickly ask a question?
Sure.
At what level was the OCA ball the one that we should have been using?
The OCA ball was, sorry, you mean what level in the leagues? Top five tiers should have all been using Buckinghams.
Because we played a game with an OCA ball, the penultimate game of the season, which I did raise with Nielsen, he knows about it, which I have to be honest, was better than the Buckingham ball. So I can't complain too much as a bowler because I got a lot more out of that than the Buckingham one. But that, I was interested to know what the actual ruling was because for me, as long as the ball was the same for both sides, it didn't make a massive difference. But I'm interested to know that's good.
Yeah, that's the point, isn't it? If it's the same for both teams, then it's the same for both teams. But as an ex-OCA club, my personal view is that the balls we used this year didn't hold up as well as the balls that we used last year. That said, I mean, there wasn't any mischief or, they didn't particularly affect the game differently, I don't think, but the wear and tear seemed to happen much quicker.
Can I just add to Martin's point there? I think he's right what he's saying. It's when we had a lot of inclement weather, the Buckingham ball seemed to disintegrate in the wet weather. I can't speak for the Hampton ball, but in the wet weather, the Buckingham ball didn't stand up very well. When it was fine and lush, it was perfect. But as soon as we had a bit of wet, the other ball went out of shape. So that's my feedback.
Okay. Stu?
We noticed the Buckingham ball deteriorating sort of after we were sort of playing Div 7 cricket for Chalgrove, and it was going after 10 overs. It's harder for sort of working the ball, keeping the shine, because you're not allowed to use spit on the ball because of COVID. But we noticed it really deteriorate quickly. It scuffed up, lost its shine really within 10 overs.
Agreed. Same.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple of swing bowlers and they were very disappointed with the Buckingham, and that just people bowling at about 60 miles an hour on relatively soft pitches and the ball's scuffed to pieces after about 7 overs, although it did often come back after about 15. But we thought, using the better quality ball, we would have a better product. But when we played some away games and they were using the Hampton, we were amazed that it did seem to be a much easier ball to keep a shine on, and both kept their shape and a bit of seam. So we were surprised that the cheaper one seemed to be a better cricket ball for bowlers.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, I've been keeping wicket. so didn't get to the location for the time. But then in the field in a game on Saturday, the seam on the Buckingham was soft. You could squeeze it with your fingers. And that was after sort of 20, 25 overs.
Okay. They are fundamentally different in the way they're finished. And the comment that was made earlier about the Buckingham goes away after 7 and comes back after 15 is because the Buckingham, I think, is a wax ball and the Hampton is a lacquered ball. Now, a wax ball is what you would use as you go higher and higher and higher, and the point being that you can bring that back. And when a lacquered ball goes, it goes and doesn't come back. It's very interesting hearing that feedback because I mean, I bowled last year with the Hampton and was absolutely delighted at the prospect of never seeing one again when we went into this season. By choice, I would take a Buckingham every single day of the week, but that's just me. Maybe it goes better for left armers or something.
Yeah, I mean, we use both, and I prefer the Buckingham all the time. It's a more proper, almost cricket ball. The Hampton is, because it's lacquered, not waxed, it behaves differently. And yes, it's probably better if it's really wet, but actually that shouldn't be what we're choosing the ball on the basis of.
Ian, if in our experience the Buckingham has been the best choice that you've made for the old CCL. It generally doesn't go out of shape. You need to work on it, but it does behave like you would expect it to. I would say we're happy with it.
Okay. Well, we've definitely got a split decision on that. I think more feedback.
Maybe just to maybe just to add to that a little bit. I certainly prefer a wax ball to a lacquered one. I think it's a better standard of ball. But the other thing was we found them to be a bit variable. Obviously, we use the Buckinghams, but some go out of shape quite quickly. Others appear to be fine. I think it might be something to raise with Tiflex is whether there's a consistency issue with some of the balls, and maybe that explains why some people seem to be seeing a little bit of variation as well.
Well, the manufacturing process at Tiflex is that they make them to order and they wait for our order. So we piled in with an order for 5,500, 6,000 balls this year. And they were all made on one run. So you would hope that that would give you some consistency across them. I think what is very important is that if you do get issues with the ball, make sure we know about it at the time. Because I think if I go back to Tiflex and say, a few people said it lost its shape, a few people said that, the first thing they'll say is, oh, show us. Because if it's a defect, we'll sort it, or we'll credit them or whatever. But if we just go back and say, well, we're not sure, it just kind of looks like we're haggling, which we will be. But if there is something specific, or you have a specific instance of the ball that hasn't held up, I'd like that to come back to us as soon as possible, and we will chase Tiflex back on it, because it's obviously, we're now a very big order for them. I mean, I think our ball order was about 55 grand. And if we say jump, they will ask how high, because they want to keep that order. And since the leagues came together, we've had 3 or 4 ball manufacturers banging on the door going, we'd like to send you some freebies and so on. So it's an area where we've got some power. We should use it, but we need specific feedback. Ian, have you still got your hand up from the last time, or is that a new hand up?
With Tiflex, does anybody know? You said they're all manufactured when we order them.
Yeah.
But is a Buckingham Ball 2021 the same as a Buckingham Ball 2022 is going to be?
At this point in time, I don't know, because we had
It's-
a
I think-
3-year contract with them, and that 3-year
Yeah.
contract's now expired.
Yeah, and the same that is it a ball they manufacture or do they buy them in and then stamp them as a Buckingham, and you get the ball that comes into them at the cost we're prepared to pay for them. Doing a business model. That's the thing I'm thinking.
I think there's an element of a ball is produced to the price that we've somewhat negotiated. Although if you look at their retail price, they're quite expensive balls. We've got no reason to suspect they're giving us different ones, but there was a few years ago, the quality definitely seemed to have deteriorated. And I think when we went back to them at the time, it was, well, that's what you're paying, that's what you'll get. And we've paid more since, so we would expect the quality of the ball to match the fact that we're paying more. And obviously, in this case, we're buying more.
Yeah, that's just a question because I don't know the business model, how they work it. So it could be that what's stamped as a Buckingham this year could be stamped as a Hampton last year, or vice versa. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously with things like the finish.
Obviously, if one's waxed and one's lacquered, then you can tell the difference. But
Is it a different supplier?
No, it's the same manufacturer.
Yeah.
I think generally they all come from the same street somewhere in Mumbai.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point.
And they come to although one of the manufacturers has been trying to get onto us, Lords, make a big point about the fact that their balls come from the same place, but they sent me some samples and the seam is different. It's nowhere near as raised. The shine is different. So it may come from the same street, but it definitely not come out of the same factory. That's for sure. Okay. Well, we seem to have a.
Can I just say on that, Ian, that we did use the Lord's ball for the Telegraph and Airy Cup finals. So it would be interesting to get some feedback from those 4 clubs as to how they felt the balls played.
We can dig that out. Yeah. Okay. Last shout on balls. If anyone wants to add anything.
I was just going to say that I found the darker ones tended to hold better and hold their shape and their shine better, whereas the lighter coloured ones within the box tended to lose shape and not hold their shine as well. So from a bowling perspective, the more dark ones we got in a box, the better it went when you were using it in a game.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting because when we very first moved to Tipflex, my recollection is they were all incredibly dark.
They were awesome. I like them.
I think the initial reaction to open the box, blimey, they're dark. I think they're not quite as dark as they were a few years ago, which will be good if you're a batsman.
Well, that slightly dovetails into where I was going to go next. We've had a lot of comment come in about leg side wides and how far up the divisions they should go. Now, I'm just going to put my bit out there first. Leg side wides are not a problem if you bowl straight. And games are not where you learn to bowl straight. The nets are where you learn to bowl straight. That's me. I'm done on the subject. What do we think?
My view, can I go first on this? Win-lose, I totally agree, should be all leg side, any down leg side is wide. What I saw this year, it almost seemed, I'm just saying seemed, as though when the win-lose finished, the umpires went, cool, now we don't have to call leg side wides. It went from one extreme to another. And as a batsman, it's simply unfair if, as quite often happened this year, you get 2 balls down the leg side you can't reach. It's even more unfair if, on one occasion, a particular umpire said, I'm allowing a bowler a very wide ball down leg side every over. And I think that we should be stricter on leg side wides. I personally wouldn't go all leg side balls. I'd go profile, but it's got to be strictly carried out. And I don't buy the argument about well, I do obviously know that wides create a longer game, but we play that in win-lose, so we can be fairly strict in win-lose draw. But certainly from a batting perspective, it's very unfair, and there was a dramatic change in attitude once we got into win-lose draw.
I don't have a strong view about whether leg side wides are the same or different in either format. my observation would be it was probably one of the areas with the most inconsistency from an umpiring perspective. I felt not necessarily biasing one team or the other, but it just felt, hugely inconsistent.
Agreed.
It's a difficult job, and I'm sure I couldn't do it, but that was my observation. Sorry.
So is there an answer that the blue or white guidelines, whatever we put in, are there for all games?
I think that's a good idea.
Because as an umpire, it definitely helps. There's no shadow of a doubt.
I raised this at the toss with every umpire that we had. I didn't actually have too many problems with that. One or two were a little bit inconsistent, but in terms of their application of it. But I agree, David. I think the guidelines for umpires would really help them. And it probably also helps the batter as well. If you're a batter, you think, well, okay, if I know it's outside of that guideline, then I might think differently about it.
Doesn't really help you on the leg side, though, does it?
Well, I think it does, Ian. I think it helps you more on the leg side than it does on the offside.
What, the blue line?
Yeah.
You need to be gadget man to hit one that's going down the blue line on the leg side. 17 inches outside the leg stump.
In my opinion, it should be profile wide, which does take an element of judgment. But if it's going to go down leg side behind a batsman in his stance position, then it's a wide. If he moves across to the offside and it goes just down leg side where he was standing, then it's not a wide.
Which is what all umpires should be going with.
They're not. Okay.
No, but that's already in place.
Okay.
So we're not actually changing anything, are we?
It may then be a messaging issue and not allowing umpires to come up with different sets of criteria for themselves. I think it may simply a very strong communication issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say that. The difficulty is that we spent ages on this at the umpires pre-season meeting, knowing that there were a high number of umpires new to the league coming in, but not all umpires necessarily were able to join the Zoom meeting or even have the technology to do it. And the further down you go, we get castigated by chairman / secretaries for saying, why on earth do you want umpires to have qualifications? Surely in the lower divisions, it's not necessary. So some of the resistance we get to what we're doing, my assertion that it's reasonable to expect an umpire to be qualified at least to stage 1 and to know the playing rules, I think that's absolutely reasonable. But there are plenty of chairmen who will argue with me if it suits them because they're struggling to find a nomination. So it's, the whole thing is about the difficulty of keeping up standards, and hopefully we try to put the better umpires in the higher tiers, and you should get much better consistency in the top tiers. All of the top tier umpires will know in their sleep what profile wides means. Some of the ones in the lower tiers, I admit, don't. They're confused by it, even though, as I say, we've tried to explain it at length. Whether you solve that by saying everything down the leg side is a wide, I think personally is a sledgehammer to crack a walnut and doesn't help the game. But there you are, that's my view.
I've got a few hands up. I'm going to go, Mike. You had your hand up, or have we passed you by?
Yeah. I had a good chat with Nielsen on this on Saturday, and it's a difficult one because I think we all appreciate umpiring is a difficult job. And there's sort of two things this season that I've struggled with as a captain to sort of get my head around. The first one is obviously we spoke about the time issue and getting the overs in earlier, and teams are using it as an excuse to take ages. But on the leg side wide subject, I cannot fathom why, if you're playing a top tier 3 division of cricket out of 178 sides, how there should be any margin. If bowlers are bowling down the leg side, they deserve to get a run taken against them and have to bowl an extra ball. I just think in the top 3 divisions, it's unforgivable, really. And there should be no interpretation whatsoever. It should just be called it for draw games, you know, 100 over games, win, lose, whatever it is, it should just be standardised. So, you know, in the lower division games, I completely appreciate, you know, sometimes you might be there till 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. If you called everything down leg side or wide, I completely get that, and that's fair enough as well. But I just think leaving so much to interpretation, I think there needs to be a standardising in the tiers, and also just complete clarity. Then there is no room for interpretation from different individuals. As difficult it is, I mean, it's great to have a say. Let's get everyone to the same umpiring standard. People will still say, "Well, I'm still using my judgment." Like I genuinely have seen umpires not give leg side wides in the win lose games 50-50, and I've had to sort of say, "Oh, just checking we're playing leg side wides," and then they give it. It is frustrating as a captain, and you shouldn't really have to do that. But just to tier it would be great from our perspective.
Okay, Justin.
I think that was quite similar to the point I was going to make. I think you have to make a distinction between the upper tiers, where you most likely have panel umpires, and the lower tiers where you most likely don't. I think if you've got panel umpires, in those upper tier games, the players want consistency, and they want the same between both teams, but also the same consecutive games around the league. So if it's strict leg side wides, no problems with that at all. My comment would be more in the lower tiers, where you're likely to have club umpires, and you're likely to have youngsters who are trying to find their way in the game. And I've seen kids have a real tough time with being called 4, 5, 6 times in an over, and that's not what the game's about down at Division 7s and 8s and stuff like. Sorry, tiers 7s and 8s. It's about, you know, having a little bit of not leniency is not the right word. It's a bit of umpiring flexibility, where they can say, look, you're getting a little bit close, or you've done 2 now in this over, I'm going to start widening, that kind of thing. I think to give it to more back into the umpires realm for those lower divisions, I think is a better idea, as long as they have a framework where they know what they're supposed to be doing. If you say profile wides, if you say leg side wides, that's fine. Everyone needs to know where they stand. But I think in those lower divisions, I think it would certainly help the game, and possibly the duration of the game, if there was a bit of flexibility.
The current rules as written are that in win-lose cricket, tiers 1 to 5, any ball passing the leg side, passing the batsman on the leg side behind him. So if the batsman moves across, it goes between the stumps and the batsman's not a wide. But any ball passing behind the batsman, tiers 1 to 5, untouched, is a wide. That is clearly written in the rules. It then, for the lower tiers, specifies that any ball that the batsman doesn't have a reasonable opportunity to hit. Now that's also the rule for win-lose draw cricket in all tiers. John.
It is of course a contradiction, because the better batsmen are more likely to hit the wider balls anyway, because they're better players.
But that's true. But at the same time, in the lower divisions, you know, bowlers are not deliberately bowling a line 18 inches outside leg stump. You know, this is something that's.
It doesn't matter if you're batting and you're getting. You in your example there, you said, well, after 2 wide balls down the leg side, the umpire has a word. That means that maybe the batsman faces an over and he can hit 3 balls.
Well, not if they're widing further on, you know, it's subsequent ones that are down leg side. I think there obviously needs to be, I think, from the umpire, the common sense approach there. But you know, it's clear if to me, if a bowler is deliberately bowling down leg side, or just losing it, or whatever.
I don't think we're discussing deliberate. Oh, we're just discussing fact. You know, what's down leg side or not, and it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't matter whether it's deliberate or not. But if a team is bowling, you saw a batsman 2 or maybe 3 very wide balls down leg side which aren't being given because the umpire has set his stall out by not giving them early on. You know, maybe there is the odd deliberate one in there, but actually I think whether it's not deliberate or is deliberate, there's no incentive for the bowler to really work hard at it. Because I've played a few games this year where I just got really frustrated that at lower levels where bowlers didn't have any incentive to bowl you a straight ball.
Okay, I think we're kind of getting across 2 subjects here. One is umpiring, one is leg side wides. I think the first instance purely on the leg side wides thing, and I have got umpiring down as a section later on a slightly different tack. But given that the way the rules are set, let me throw something out here then. So for win-lose cricket, the rules are clear. Anything passing down leg in win-lose, tiers 1 to 5 is a wide. For those teams that are playing in tiers 1 to 5, if we said, let's do that in win-lose draw as well, would that be something you would approve of, or think that's maybe pushing it too far?
Enforce the rules as they are written.
Yeah. But we're not, just for the moment, we're not talking about enforcement, we're talking about the rules. Then we can, once we've got the rule, if we're happy with the rule, then we can talk about how we enforce it.
I think in theory it's fine, but the problem you have is that probably tiers 3, 4, 5, you're more likely to end up with games going on and over rates becoming a problem. So there is it's a difficult job. I don't think there's a right answer, and we might not find an answer tonight. But
I don't. I mean, again, it's just my observation for one season, but I don't think that's a huge risk. There'll be a few more wides, but I don't think to the extent that it would materially lengthen the game a lot. I would personally be in favour of anything that removes subjectivity. I think that's the direction of travel of cricket in general. So I think it's a good idea.
I think if you want to just leg side wides, you can give it, and speaking as an umpire, and everybody up to, we're in 5A this summer. Everybody understands that, and there's not a problem with it. The problem for the lower divisions is, as already been said, youngsters getting into the game for the first time. I think it's very difficult to bowl consistently wide of the leg stump. And that's rather skillful. If there's a youngster trying to bowl and he just straight down the leg side, you've got to allow him some latitude. Otherwise, the games will go on forever and ever, and they get dispirited. I think the structure we've got so far is more or less okay. What we need to have a discussion about, which comes up later in the agenda, is do we stay with win-lose and win-draw-lose? Because I think that also affects the leg side ruling.
Well, I've got that on the list. Don't worry.
Can I just offer? Sorry, just one quick counter view to what was just said, which is they may well get dispirited, but there is also the chance that they feel patronised by being given favours. I know when I was a teenager making mistakes playing cricket, I didn't want any favours. The rules are the rules, and I didn't want to be patronised. So I think it's a fine balance one way or the other.
To also point out, it's not just young bowlers that bowl down the leg side.
No, it's not.
You could leave it up to the umpires.
And we're back to the beginning.
I think that's the answer. Get the umpires, do a sort of PR campaign to make sure that umpires can't turn up and decide they're going to have a different set of criteria for leg side wides as written in the rules.
Well, I mean, we did have an instance of that last week where an umpire just came in and said, that's what we're going to do, rather than we're going to play by the rules. But I shan't highlight that one. Okay, I think we've seen all the opinions, and I think we've got some feel for the direction. I may have to watch the recording back on that. Let's go to something a little less controversial for a moment. Tees. Although that might not be a little less controversial. As a league, we decided sort of midway through the season when the restrictions were being relaxed, that it made little or no sense to change in the middle of the season, because people wouldn't be used to it. That some clubs would end up having to provide more tees than others. And so we just said, look, that's how we started, that's how we'll finish. Tees are not part of the constitution or the rules of the Charitable League. They are just a convention. What do we think? Would we like to have cricket tees back, or do we prefer to? Now, we will not propose this or otherwise at the AGM because as I say, it's not a rule. What we will do is if there is a swell of idea, then we'll probably put a poll up on the website for all clubs, and then we'll go with the majority of that. But it'd be interesting to see what your thoughts are.
Leave it as it is my thought.
Okay.
Yeah, we're very lucky at Hawley. Our ladies section have always done teas, and although I say it done extremely good teas, and when we first put to them that they won't be preparing teas, you can imagine they might not be preparing teas. You can imagine the reaction. However, as the season's gone on, they're quite enjoying not having to do teas. We do a cup of tea and a cake is always on offer for a donation. The other thing is, of course, that a lot of players we found eat their teas before the tea break anyway. So, we wouldn't now see it as an issue if teas were dropped, even though, James, that means we miss a great tea at Great Britain.
Yeah, thanks for setting me up, David. Yeah, I mean, our teas are quite famous, but as a captain, it's one less thing to organise and one less group of people to speak to. One thing I think is important is the provision of drinks. Just even if it's water, just having that available would be preferable. But yeah, I actually prefer not having to organise teas, and the romantic in me would love to have a cricket tea every so often, but in reality, the world's moved on, I think.
We had a quick straw poll on this, and it was actually relatively even. Perhaps the old stagers like myself prefer to have a cricket tea, but some of the youngsters were saying, well, I'm quite happy to go to Greg's on the way to the game or whatever and pick up whatever I like. It seemed to be not a massive issue. I thought perhaps it would be, but it didn't seem to be a massive issue. But I think one thing that was clear was that players prefer to have it during the game rather than afterwards, if that was an option. And also the time duration was one thing that's been mentioned in the chat there. I don't think we should make it the break between innings any longer if we did bring teas back. I think the shorter break has actually been quite good. And the other thing was not to leave it up to the clubs. If you had it like, oh, well, you can decide to have teas between your opposition on a week-by-week basis, I think that's just one more thing to a massive headache for captains, talking between 2 to 3 different clubs, depending on how many teams you've got playing. That's just too hard to do. I think either we make a decision to do it or not do it, but I think not leave it up to clubs.
I straw polled my team, and they kind of went about 9-2 in favour of teas. And I said, oh, by the way, if you say you are in favour of teas, you are volunteering to do a tea next season. That brought it back 8-3 the other way.
Can I just pick up on the time thing? I'd just like to make the point as an umpire that we need that 30-minute break. For the most part, we're the only ones on the field the whole time. The batting side gets a break, and if you try to shorten the tea break, what you're doing is increasing the difficulty for umpires of maintaining concentration for the length of the match, and you'll get more errors towards the end of the match. Professional umpires don't, in general, have to do 2 3-hour, 10-minute stints back to back, but we're expected to. So I honestly think 30 minutes is the minimum.
Can I just echo that, having umpired quite a lot this season, you need that break, honestly.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Ian.
It's not, and I've just put a message on the chat there, it's not just a question of needing the break because of the conditions maybe of the game or the weather or whatever. Umpires have stuff to do during the break. We can't just walk off straight and get our sandwiches out of the car. We have to consult with them, with the scorers, make sure that's okay. We have to prepare for the next innings. back to the scorers to make sure they're ready, look at the balls and all that sort of stuff. So it's not just a question of coming off, having your cup of tea or your tea and going back out again.
Okay,
I think that's all fair comment. I think what I was alluding to was if the teas were brought back, I don't see any reason to make it 35 or 40 minutes. If 30 is the minimum
That's
for
accepted. That's
umpiring
accepted.
reasons,
Yeah.
then fine. That's perfectly good reasoning.
Okay. Yeah, Stuart.
I was just going to say, 2 years ago, I would have been horrified at the thought of not having teas for league games, but it's amazing how quickly you get used to something. And now the idea of organising, trying to find another tea lady because ours is quick because she hasn't done a tea for 2 years, sounds, it's going to be harder to go back. So I think in hindsight, we'd probably be in favour of continuing with packed lunches.
Okay.
Which is a shame. When we went at the rep games against Thames Valley a few weeks ago, we had a tea, and it was actually, I didn't realise until we had a tea how much perhaps we'd missed it. And I would have absolutely voted no, just as it is. And we had a tea over at Finch Hampstead a few weeks ago, and it was great. So whether that is from our perspective, we're thinking that maybe we'll have teas on a Sunday, and that's a good incentive to get people playing on Sunday a bit more because it's more of an event, more of an occasion. But it's an interesting one.
Eric, could I recommend
Dan.
over 50s cricket? We'll get a tea every week.
Yeah. Dan, I've got a digital hand on.
Yeah, we're quite lucky at Vista in that we've got a tea lady, and she has, since the rules are relaxed, been providing a normal tea, but for home teams only. I assume if the decision was made across the league that teas wouldn't be provided as a matter of course, we could continue to do that for home teams.
I mean, the baseline would be you make your own arrangements for tea. So if you collectively as a club decided you were all going to chip in and do a tea, I guess that's fine.
Okay, cool.
I mean, we're not going to insist that everybody buys vegan or everyone has to have their tea from the fish and chip shop. So, okay, anything else on teas? I think we've got a reasonable.
This is a good time to mention drinks breaks. Is it relevant now?
Well, I mean, drinks breaks I think would have to come back and probably be back to where we were 2 years ago of either one drinks break or two drinks breaks. And I think it's not unreasonable to expect clubs to provide drinks.
I think that's essential because I think that's added 10 minutes to a match. At least players going off, and it's not just a break for a quick drink. It's a sort of, foot up on the chair. Break.
Yeah, I think one of the things that, and I've got this down more as a bit of information rather than anything else. This year on a number of issues like over rates, like compliance, we've had a little bit of a getting to know you year, and the committee have not been cracking the whip necessarily that hard. But I think we will be coming back next year, assuming that we're not subject to any restrictions and we're not required to sanitize every 6 overs, etc., etc. We will be coming back in and going, okay, the rules as written are your drinks break should last more than 3 minutes. And it should be conducted on the pitch. It's not a fag break. It's not a general rest period. It's a drinks break.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of got a bit confused or brought together with sanitations and so on and so forth. David.
Yeah, the first thing is that it's up for the umpires to agree with the captains how many drink breaks they have. That's the first thing. The second thing is because of the COVID restrictions, we've not been able for, say, the home club to prepare drinks and bring them onto the pitch.
Yeah.
So most players have gone off the pitch to get their drinks bottles. I can't recall 5-10 minute drink breaks pre-COVID, restrictions. So I don't actually see, if we get back to normality, I don't really see that as an issue.
No, my question was simply whether we will go back to the old system, which sounds like we will.
Yes.
Well, clubs have to provide it, and players should bring it halfway onto the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for players to go off for a drinks break under normal circumstances. But in the current circumstances, it was bring your own drinks, bring your own food, which meant everybody went off the park to pick up the drinks, and then people disappeared off, and drinks breaks took longer. But no, we would be looking to eradicate that. Okay. Moving it around a little bit. Cup cricket. Now, I'm not sure how many teams here played in the Cups. Fair number entered, but then ended up not playing. What are our thoughts about Cup cricket? Like it? Don't need it? Don't want it? Would love it?
Ian, Hawley entered the Cup. We sort of treated it, we play Sunday fixtures anyway, every week, and we sort of treated it as a Sunday fixture. So in a way, it was at least one fixture. As it turned out, it was only one fixture, but it was at least one fixture, as it were, already organised for us. So yeah, we're in favour of the Cups. I can't remember, I was a little bit disappointed at the amount of entrants. I think, whilst it's not compulsory, it might have been nice to have more support for the Cups. But yeah, we're in favour of it. The particularly the second team cup, which we classed as a Sunday fixture, as I say.
Who we got here from divisions 1 and 2? There's no cup there. Pete, Justin.
Yeah, Channel Division 2. Our main issue with it was it being on a Sunday. We don't play much Sunday cricket at all, and we would have struggled to get teams out. I think the fact that it wasn't a Division 1-2 cup was okay. We played in the OCB cup that was midweek instead, and first team players were more interested in doing that on I think it was Tuesday evenings. But I think Sundays is difficult. I think for players to commit to 2 days of cricket now, I think is something that was difficult for our club at least to do. If there was some flexibility in having those games on a different day, maybe. But I think generally speaking, we found that difficult to commit.
If they're going to be 40 over games, there aren't many options. So.
Well, maybe that's something to consider as to whether they'd be 40 over games.
Yeah, Martin's just put more or less the same thing in the chat. Good for a T20 Cup. To get players.
I think the problem for clubs like ours, and I'm interested, obviously Peter's on from Long Marston, is the travelling it would be to go and play a cup match on a Sunday away. We actually played in a league, first and second team on a Sunday, so we're in the Bez League. But there's not a lot of desire at Great Brickhill for that. But I don't know whether it would work for clubs that are on the periphery of the region. So maybe it might be an Oxfordshire thing where most of the clubs are based, where they can get to games within half an hour fairly easily. But for clubs like Brickhill, and I can't speak for Peter, but I'm sure Long Marston will probably struggle.
Yeah, no, same comment, James. Exactly. Yeah, the travel doesn't interest us. I mean, Sunday cricket, trying to get people to commit to 2 days of cricket won't happen. We play Sunday friendlies at our place because we've got the facility and we may as well open our bar every Sunday and get our regular drinkers in and make money across the bar that way. I think that's what we prefer as a club. So for us, we haven't missed the opportunity, and I don't think we were looking to get one anytime soon anyway.
Yeah, that's a fair point James and Peter have made, particularly if it was a midweek T20 game. You just ain't going to be able to do it.
Well,
and in fact, I guess most clubs may struggle.
Unless we play Long Marston.
Yeah, every week.
Or Leighton Buzzard, be all right.
Wolverton, Leighton Buzzard. Be a nice little cup over here.
It won't take long to do the draw, that's for sure.
The object of cup cricket is not to stop the teams from fulfilling their Sunday league fixtures, and so for those two teams, obviously this is not appropriate. Obviously our main focus is league cricket, which is the Saturday fixtures. What we're offering is the long-established cups in the lower divisions, lower tiers, for those people who would like to play the occasional Sunday game. As Dave said with Hawley, it was one game, but it was enjoyable to actually be involved in the cups this year just for that one game. What the thing behind Ian's question about divisions 1 and 2 is, there was a view expressed from one of the Division 1 sides that they were being excluded because they weren't allowed to put a team into a cup. And so my question to Divisions 1 and 2 sides is, do you feel that there is a place for a 40-over Sunday competition? The Great Brickhill view is no, and it may well be that that is the view of the majority of them. There is the village knockout, which allows many of those teams to play early season 40-over cricket anyway. So I think the important thing is that there are cups, and if you wish to be involved and you're not able to be, then get in touch with us and tell us how you think you'd like to see it work.
Okay.
To be fair, given the number of entrants, and we could have accommodated, apart from one cup, quite a few more, if you got to the final, you still would have only played 4 games through the course of the season.
Yeah. Okay. Again, we've used logged, recorded, and we'll sum them up along with what we get on the other meetings. Okay, we're getting to some of the juicier bits now. Before we get there, I said I would raise this because a club has sent it in. One team clubs, they're currently restricted to tier 5. Now, the thinking behind doing that was that we did not want a situation where a tier 4 game was cancelled because the team couldn't raise a side. And there were, I think, 3 fixtures forfeited in tier 5. The suggestion that's come has that they should also not be allowed to play in tier 8 because a one-team club playing in tier 8 is unfair to the 3rd and 4th teams. And I think the example that was quoted was Division 8A, which was pretty much dominated by 3 first-team clubs. My personal argument is, well, they won't next year because they'll be in 7th. But any traction on that? I'll put it out there.
I think that as clubs find their level, I think that things will peter out and it won't be an issue. I think that, you know, like all amalgamations, it takes time for sides to find where they fit into that structure. And, you know, these one-team clubs might have, you know, a couple of very good players that play for them for a long period of time. And that's brilliant. They move up through the leagues. But by the same token, there's probably not a lot behind them. So, you know, it will come and go as players come and go within those structures.
We've got Martin and Steve here, who are both one-team clubs in lower divisions. I'll be interested in your views on this.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if they're not going to be allowed in tier 8, and we're saying they're not allowed at all, basically.
Well, no, he's saying that they're not allowed in tier 8, but they can play in 7, 6, and 5.
Right. Well,
so how you get in the league is.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we conceded 2 games this year. The last one due to a wedding. So obviously, if someone's getting married in the team, then there's no one available. So, and it, you know, it didn't feel good conceding those games. I feel bad for the opposition who lost the fixture. I think it's very fair enough that you don't allow them higher up the league. That said, you know, we try our best to recruit. We enjoy our cricket. We put up some good games against opposition, and on balance, I think have brought something to the league. You know, so I think the line at Division 4 feels about right, but maybe that's just a parochial point of view because we played in Div 5. I don't know, but I'd like to think as we go into next year, you know, we won't have any concessions, but I can't promise it.
But yeah, we were in similar boat to Martin. Yeah, we conceded 2 fixtures. Again, wedding, and we had a COVID issue as well. But from we played in the OCA, the teams that are in Div 8, Dorchesters, etc., Wattons and Twos, we competed against those sides, and we held our own in Div 7. But when we played against the likes of Bledlow and Kimball and Tetsworth Twos were in our division last year as well in the OCA, and they ramped the league, and they did again this year. And they get a spill from Wickham, etc. And I'm not sure where you go. You say you got one side shouldn't be allowed in Div 8, but you get the 3rds and the 4ths. They have got some really good players in their teams as well that step down from their 2s, etc. And they can have a really good game in that division as well. So it's a balancing act.
think
Yeah, I mean,
clearly
sorry.
the some teams are in divisions that were a bit weak for them to start with, but everybody knew that was going to be the case in the first couple of seasons, which will equalise. But I think probably a more pertinent point is where the League Management Committee places new entrants to the Cherwell that have only got one team. And it seems clear they shouldn't necessarily always go in at the lowest level. And finding a level may mean they should get relegated as opposed to winning their division.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's clearly what happened in this case, isn't it?
I think the problem if you put somebody in with an expectation potentially they will get relegated is you've actually relegated an existing club to fit them in with no real benefit. So we've always taken the view that find your own level, but work, earn it. So if you go in a division too low, then yes, you will win it, but you're clearly a better side. But putting somebody in affects one of our existing teams, and we've had votes at AGMs in the past where clubs have voted not to accept new clubs because they felt they would be relegated if they came in to a particular division they're in, and that's an incredibly short-term view and a very small-minded or only our club view. But that absolutely has been the case in the past. One club withdrew a proposal for a club to come into the league because they felt that it would mean if they came in, they would get relegated a couple of years ago. So we have to get a balance.
Yeah, the example of 8A, where those 3 first-team clubs ran away with the league. In actual fact, those clubs were not placed in 8 for any other reason than that was where they sat, relatively speaking, to the other OCA clubs in the amalgamation. And we knew that there would be some clubs that were too strong for their divisions and there would be some clubs that were too weak for the divisions, because you can't bring these many people together, particularly after 2 years, because it's 2 years since we had a lineup to be able to judge it against. And that was why we said initially that we were going to go with a 3 up, 3 down system in order to allow that to move quicker in the lower divisions for people to get out and find their level. And if a one-team club came to us with a clear playing history that suggested they're going to wipe the floor with divisions 8 and 7, we probably would put them in 6. And new teams don't come in at the bottom league, and that will lead me on some information I'm going to give you in a moment. But
Ian, do you have a view on the one club thing? Because we're definitely quite self-conscious about it. Like we are aware that accommodating us and other similar clubs from the OCA with only one team, we do feel like the spotlight's on us a bit, and we were, it wasn't comfortable conceding those games, and we were sort of wondering, is everyone muttering? And what's your view on it?
Well, no, I don't think there was any muttering. And my personal view is that you weren't the only teams that conceded games. In 7 and 8, third teams, fourth teams, and so on concede games all the time. I think there has to be, and this is why we set the tier 5 limit. I think there has to be a safety valve at tier 4, tier 3, tier 2, tier 1. I think it would be reasonable for oppositions to say it is unacceptable that we don't get a game of cricket because someone couldn't raise a team.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I also think that tier 5 teams who get strong and look like they're going to go up will attract players, and very possibly will be in a position to say, actually, do you know what, we'd like to put a second team in tier 8, and that then justifies that, then allows that movement up to tier 4. But in terms of, my personal opinion was that the no first teams in tier 8 was complete utter nonsense. Teams should find their level, and okay, Chinner and Golden Sparrows and Harwell were too good for 8A. Let's see if they're too good for 7A. I suspect they won't be. I suspect they'll have a competitive season of cricket. And if they win 7A, well, good on them. They'll have their chance in 6A.
Yeah, but I agree with that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're trying to increase participation, and if we took that kind of view, we would counteract so many of the other positive measures we're trying to implement to attract people to the game. It seems madness. So I agree.
The original Cherwell League rule of all clubs, all entrant clubs had to have 2 teams, came from a much smaller set where you had, and at various times the Cherwell went to first team leagues, and it might be the Trinity actually was in there was a league for the first teams and then a separate league for seconds and thirds and fourths. And that got scrapped because, you know, clearly there were second teams like Aston Rowan, who run high in Division 1, who were so much better than first teams. So you're actually diluting the quality for the first teams. I think, for me, get as many clubs in as you can, and as long as they can run their club, and yeah, there are going to be concessions in the bottom tiers. We know that it's not professional cricket. To me, it doesn't make any difference if it's a fourth team or a first team.
I think, Ian, a couple of points before we move on. Firstly, 8A, which has been mentioned, 2 of the teams have been promoted there are new teams, and it would have been inappropriate to put them in any other tier. And the other thing is concerning the ceiling. Above tier 5, we are talking about aspirational cricket as opposed to recreational cricket. And if a club is aspirational, then it should be having more than one team.
Okay.
And I think we should move on.
Yeah, well, I've raised it. I said I would raise it. I've raised it. It's done. Right. Here we go. Roll your sleeves up. Win, lose against win, lose, draw.
No change.
Okay, so we're all happy. Good. Moving on.
No change.
Win, lose versus win, lose, draw. I'll be particularly interested. I'd like to start here with ex-OCA teams, because charitable teams have been playing win, lose, draw, split season for 5, 6, 7 years. So it'd be interesting to hear OCA clubs coming in, what your thoughts were.
I don't mind starting. I'm purely talking about tier 8, so 40 overs, which is just not long enough to have win, draw, lose, in my opinion, because 40 overs isn't enough time to bowl a team out, and you haven't got enough overs to make an imaginative declaration. But worse than that for me, at a level where you are trying to encourage participation, you have got young players, to be able to bowl a bowler for 13 overs out of 40 is just too much. And the pressure on a captain, even from your own team, to try and win the game by bowling your best bowlers means little 13-year-old Johnny isn't going to get a bowl.
Okay.
So in level 8, I'd like to see it just go to win-lose, 40 overs, and 1/5 of the overs per bowler is perfect.
My view from Div 5, where obviously there's a few more overs, we were definitely interested at the prospect of playing a new format. So I think we went into it with an open mind, although probably fearing the worst a little bit in terms of how late some of those games might finish and what they might be like to play in. My honest view is I think I would give it a go for another season. I think one season doing it is probably not enough to form a definitive view. But my experience of this season is that those games would not have acted as recruitment vehicles for our club, whereas the win-lose games probably would have done.
Can I just? I'm gonna query. I've got some data here, and out of the games that if we took the win-lose draw games, out of the games where it didn't rain, which always messes up a game, whatever you do, only 14% of them were draws, and of those, 40% of them, the team batting second were at least 8 wickets down, or within 15 runs of the team batting first, and that's a significantly higher proportion than in the win-lose games, when in fact,
but that does it.
So I'm not quite sure where the negativity comes in. I mean, to me, it keeps the game going. I mean, we had a game I didn't play. We had a game where Morley smashed the ball around with his mate all afternoon, and they won by 130 runs. Well, presumably, actually, had we had a tea, we could have gone home at that point.
I think there's 2 points, and I'll shut up in a minute and let others speak. But I would second the point that was made previously, in terms of how easy it is or it isn't to get other players and young players into the game, with that kind of bowling allocation. But the more pertinent point is, you're rightly referencing the outcomes, but I think what those don't reflect is the nature of the play necessarily. So they may be 8 wickets down, But if they started shutting up shop after 12 overs, it's not a particularly enthralling day. And you may argue you should have more skill to get them out, but
well equally, it's not a particularly enthralling day if you're chasing 444 as somebody was on Saturday. To be honest, that's neither side has any interest after seeing a game where the first team has scored a huge score, because the team go out, they know they've won. The team who are going out to bat know they've lost before you've even finished your tea. Whereas at least in the win-lose-draw games, at tea time, things have to be done. People have to take wickets. People have to score runs.
Yeah, but when a side sets out to draw, it isn't much fun.
No, but I don't believe, looking at what I can see here, very many teams do that. That may not be your experience, but I say that on average there was one draw per division per week.
Yeah, but that's the outcome. That's the outcome. That's not necessarily how they approached it.
No, true. But if you take all 10 wickets, you probably don't desperately care, do you? Compared to if they go out and have a net chasing, scoring 150 when you scored 300. Is that?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, fair enough. Look, as I said, I think we should give it another year to see if we have a different experience next year. But I would still stand by our experience, which was where we brought some new players into those games. We found it harder to get them back than in the games where it was win-lose. But that was just our situation.
Can I just say, as a club with a number of different players across different sort of eras, the youngsters seem to prefer the win-lose because that's what they've been brought up with. Old farts like me love the win-lose-draw because it actually brings out different skills as a captain to try and to set a target. To highlight your point about the 4-4-4, I'd have probably declared after 35 overs, Gary, if we'd had
absolutely.
And that would have given us 65 overs to bowl them out,
absolutely,
as we did in the return fixture. But so I do think that it brings a different discipline, different skills out. So personally, whilst I really like the split format, I do get the argument for the other one as well. And I do think more players, not just people who are sat on this Zoom call here because we care passionately about our clubs and the game, would probably go for win-lose. But I actually think the point system probably favours teams that do well. For example, the 3 games that we drew this year, we had teams 8 and 9 down in the second team. So we got the majority of the points and therefore it rewarded us. So I think the point system is fair. And even though we didn't win those games, and we would have done if it had been a win-lose format, I genuinely think it works pretty well.
Do you know the thing that occurs to me, and maybe this is controversial, but I think what it boils down to in the end is, although it's a team game and we are clubs and we're in a league and the points matter, on the day the individuals care about their performances and they care about that. They kind of care about what they did in the game and how they spent their Saturday. And I think it's kind of for those reasons that your observation about the young players preferring win-lose is more to do with that, I think.
Well, they don't have to work out the point situation, Martin. When I sit there and go, come on, lads, whether we win the draw points, they're looking at me, what are you on about? That's basically, that's how it is.
2 observations. One is half of our youngsters probably go home not knowing whether they've won, lost or drawn most weeks. And actually, a youngster who perhaps saves you the game with 30 not out, when there's pressure and there's men around the bat and there's pressure from the fielding side to get him out, will actually gain more of the game than if he goes out as a net when there's no chance of winning and you're 150 behind. So it can be turned into some real positives, some of those efforts from the youngsters.
Steve, can I bring you in just to get, because you're one of the other OCA clubs. What were your thoughts?
There's a massive spider in the bath.
See, a lot of our players actually just prefer the win-lose. And I say actually 99%.
Get it for me, it's that big.
And I watched that
Yes,
last night.
I can't sleep with that in the room.
And they were just like they just didn't. I think maybe because we don't understand the format as well. And again, I see John's just sort of kind of agreeing with that. If we've not played it, all we've ever done for the last 5-6 seasons, or even longer than that, I've been playing, is we've just played win and lose.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's the understanding and the mindset of the game that can change it. But from my perspective, I actually do prefer the win and lose because you've turned up, you're looking to win every game. That's what you want to do. You want to win every game and get promoted. But if you then turn it and then all of a sudden you've got somebody who stands at the other end and just doesn't even play a shot, all they do is block it all afternoon, and you can't bowl about or they don't make a mistake, it then does become boring. As you say, a lot of people said the younger generation who were trying to get into cricket don't enjoy it. And that's what we found.
I take the point entirely. I think you've hit the nail on the head though when you talk about the mindset and the understanding, because the only team that I played against this year that absolutely blocked out for a draw was an ex-OCA team who kind of looked at it and thought, well, we ain't getting 275. And their opener batted 45 overs for 22 not out. And at the end of the game, I just went up and shook his hand and said, mate, that is a phenomenal effort, because we had 8 men around the bat trying to get him out and trying everything we could to get him out. And their whole team walked away feeling like, you know, having been battered around the pitch for 275, they didn't lose the match. And I think having that, working that mindset out as to, okay, well, what is achievable here? I mean, we did then take him in the bar and said, you know, if you'd actually got on with it, you could have got an extra 4 batting points. And he went, yeah, didn't really work that out. But he just went, I don't want to lose the game. We don't want to lose. It is a mindset thing. And I get why the kids all want to play win-lose cricket, because that's all they ever see on the TV. You know, you don't see many kids glued to a test match. But I said, we're here to get views, not to preach. And you know, I'm encouraged by Martin's comment that they'd like to give it another year, because I think it's a learning process as well. You know, if you've not played it, it takes a while just to get your head around what is achievable and what isn't achievable, and what you can, you know, how you can set yourself up.
Just one thought, really. I feel a little bit in this conversation that maybe there are prevailing points of view, and we're kind of seeing what we want to see a little bit in what's happening. And actually, this might be one of the topics where you might want to canvass opinion more widely. You know, I don't know how well we are representing the views of the people that are playing necessarily.
Yeah, it's fair comment.
I think the higher up the structure you go, probably the more appropriate win, draw, lose cricket is, but it's probably a harder fit in the bottom couple of tiers.
Well,
part of that lower standard of cricket, or not standard's the wrong word, lower tier cricket that we play in is about teaching these kids to value wickets, and as a bowler, how you go about earning a wicket as well. And I think that if we're not teaching them that in, you know, when they start senior cricket, I think we're doing them a disservice. You know, thinking that they've come through playing 2020 hit and giggle cricket all their career, they get into senior cricket and that's what they're doing again, but they're doing it for a slightly longer period of time. I think that the sooner we get these kids to focus on valuing wickets and as a bowler earning a wicket, the better they're going to be in the long run.
I agree with Peter, because you know, if teams who are in Division 1 of the Cherwell have aspirations to go to the home counties, they play an even longer format of the game, where they play 110 overs and to bat 60 overs. And they do need that skill. And I think it brings different skills out in the game, such as defending your wicket, as Peter said, and also from a captain, setting the right fields to actually take wickets to win games, not just stop teams from scoring. And personally, I feel that's a really important skill to have. And I love the split season because it brings out the best. Also, one thing to consider is that for teams that rely on 2 or 3 players, and we know that there are clubs that do that, I actually think the win-lose 50-50 format will not favour them, because clubs that have got stronger depth around their batting and bowling will then do better. And I'm not sure that's necessarily what we want to promote either.
John, you were waving.
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely in James and Pete's camp on that. And I think to some extent it's kind of how we sell it and how we explain it and how we explain it to youngsters, in particular how we explain the laws. And Ian, you know how I've bashed on, you know, even in 4A, where we've been in Cherwell for a long time and we should know the laws, that players go into a game not knowing what the point system is and how it works. And I think it is all up to all of us captains to get that across. I'm kind of surprised and disappointed in a way that, we've always played win, lose, draw, and now we've gone to win, lose in a split season, which I think is good. And then there's a sort of talk about going the whole hog, and that would disappoint me. I'd also like to make the point that Gary made that, you can get some pretty bad. I've played in games, win and lose, where teams have set a huge score early on, and there is no point really in going out after tea. The incidence of boring draws is very low. And if a team is 9 down and the team bowling doesn't get them out, they tend to say it's a bad game of cricket. Well, they should have got the 10th wicket. I know it's easier said than done, but I think we're in danger of dumbing the game down if we go to win-lose entirely. And finally, I think if a captain puts all his fielders, 5 fielders on the boundary, or as many as he can on the boundary early on, it's almost can be as boring as blocking out a draw. So I think the captaincy issue is really, really important, and something that will be lost. The skills will be lost if we only play win-lose.
Okay.
Here ended.
Anyone else want to chip in on this?
Ian, just a plea for the umpires, trying to make sure that the teams know what format they are playing and what rules apply is a bit of a strain. And I think if we could make the changeover, I'm happy with win, draw, win, lose, draw. But I think if we could make some shorter rules for things like wides, no balls, fielders outside the circle and stuff like that, it would make life a bit easier.
Okay, I'm going to move it on, but it's sort of semi-related. Length of matches. We've kind of touched on this a little bit. We currently have 3 different lengths of game. So in tiers 1 to 5, you're playing 100 over cricket. In tiers 6, 7, you're playing 90 over cricket. And in tier 8, we're currently playing 80 over cricket. Now, to come back to Stu's point earlier about it's impossible to bowl out a team in 40 overs. Well, it's difficult to bowl a team out in 40 overs. One solution to that would be to play 100 over cricket in tier 8, but I suspect that's probably not going to meet with universal approval. We have had a few people come in and say, well, we think it should change. We want the barriers to go to different, or the break points to go to different places. What are the thoughts? And I would just put a little caveat in here. I played most of this season in tier 7, and there is a kind of general consensus that tiers 1 to 3 is serious cricket, tiers 4 and 5 is pretty serious cricket, and below that it's all just a bit of fun. If you think that, come and have a game in tier 7.
Yeah, quite.
Because honestly, there was some seriously competitive cricket played down there, and some people that really were pushing the edges as hard as they can. And from what I hear as well, tier 8, there were some very competitive games of cricket down there. It wasn't just 22 blokes going out and tossing the ball around and having a bit of a laugh, but it was competitive. So I'd like us not to just be too dismissive of 7 and 8, but at the same token, I do appreciate there's a lot of kids playing, and there are different constrictions on sides that when you're putting those out. But what do we think about 100 over, 90 over, 80 over? Should we be tweaking that, moving it around?
Ian, I think you should leave it as it is. I think it seems to work well.
Okay.
I would say in Division 8, I think the win-lose 40 overs is a really good format. But if you can to continue with win, draw, lose, I'd like to see those games go to 45 overs, because a lot of the problems I mentioned are because you don't have enough overs to play draw cricket. But if you had an extra 10 give captains a bit more leeway to to try and manage a game to get a result.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Who's playing? What about people playing tier 6? If you're moving up to tier 5, you're going from 90 to 100. Morley, I think you've got a view on this.
Yeah, I mean, my club representing 10 tomorrow, but from my perspective, I think we, as a one-team club, we have people that are not comfortable with playing 100 over cricket because of the time constraints, and so potentially going up into Division 5 from Division 6, we would, I think I would struggle with availability. So I would personally like to see 90 overs, excuse me, 90 overs in Division 5. Division 5 and 6, and then the 40 overs in the in Division 8, for example. Again, a slight tweak of the boundaries. We would also support having another go at win, lose, draw. Just picking up on a previous comment.
That's interesting because our captain said at one point early on in the season, "Oh yeah, it'd be good if we get promoted." And I pointed out he'd have to play 100 over cricket and all those things. And he actually slightly weighed back from wanting to get promoted at that point on the basis that it does change. And I've done both, and it's only 10 overs more, but it seems like an inordinate amount of time longer.
Yeah,
it does. So it was our first. We've come from 45 overs and went into the 50 over format. It's only 10 overs more, but what I should say is we joked amongst ourselves that we were very certain we would not bat 50 overs in any of the games, and as it happens, we did. I think 3 or 4 times, so we surprised ourselves, but those were noticeably long days, and I think the general feeling was that was long. On the other hand, it was our first season at it, and presumably over time you get used to it. So I personally would hold back from making a strong point about reducing it because it's only our first year of doing it. But they did feel long, the games that went the distance, I must say.
Okay. Currently, the rules on win, lose, draw 100 over matches allow you to bat 53 if you want to. In the 90 over matches, you stop batting at 45, whether you like it or not. Picking up a little bit on Stu's point, would it be of an advantage in a 90 over game to have the option to go, say, 47, 43? Because we don't allow that anymore. You can declare, and if you declare, you get the extra overs. But if you bowl a side out in 40, you don't get 50 overs to bat. You get 45 overs to bat.
Does anyone know why it's different anyway? Why it's historically been different?
Because it's historically been different.
It is historical. It's been a long time.
Was there?
I think it was encouraged. It was meant to encourage sides to win the toss and bat first, because obviously it's deemed that you have less control of the game batting first than you do batting second.
In terms of the differential in overs, yeah, that's absolutely right. But then as we go down, there's no differential, so that's sort of it's not clear in the mists of time why it wasn't made as 46, 44 or 47, 43 or something at that point.
But it requires a little more, and I think quite often in 100 over matches, teams that don't have 275 on the board will just bat 53 automatically in order to try and bat the opposition out of the game, which is not a terribly imaginative way of doing it. But there are teams who we've seen will declare on 51 or on 49 because then they can bowl their bowlers 17 or one of the bowlers 17 if they want to. It does allow a little more imagination from the captain.
Also based on the home counties. So the differential in overs is percentage-wise the same as they have in the 120 and 110 over games.
Yeah, I mean, I think the differential basis is fairly universal. I mean, I've played in 3 different leagues and every one of them had the ability to go beyond the halfway point. I mean, where I used to play in Scotland, it was an 80 over game and you could bat 44. And there were not many draws in that format. That was on covered pitches back in the 1800s. So it's slightly different.
Probably a few rained off.
1 or 2. Well, you know, we don't stop for rain in Scotland. If there's hail,
you'd never get a game.
Yeah, if there's hail, you go off, but otherwise, play through.
This is maybe an unfair question, but what is added to the experience of the 22 players playing 50 overs rather than 45? So over the course of the season, what would you argue is, other than the fact that it's how it's always been, if you take that out of it, from an experiential point of view, what is different or better about 50 versus 45?
More people get more cricket.
I don't think it's a matter of difference. It's a matter of, it comes back to the point I made earlier about the fact that the top of our structure is aspirational cricket. And so we are working towards the aspiration of moving to the home counties, which is 110 overs, 120 overs. So in terms of the structure, it is essential that the aspirational tier is playing the same sort of cricket in the same sort of format, because that's the whole point of the aspirational pathway.
And I think you touched on it earlier that we don't think we can bat 50 overs. Well, there's the aspiration, there's the incentive perhaps to improve and get more players who can bat for longer.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, but if you draw on our anecdotes, I'm not sure in those games many players got a bat. We just got a bigger score.
I think you might be conflating two issues here. There's the issue of whether you play total of 100 overs or a total of 90 overs.
That's my question, really. Yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to whether you have an oversplit. And I think the original question was to do with whether the oversplit should go further down the divisions, the tiers rather. Down to, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Unfortunately, you guys have stumbled on one of the biggest bugbears I have, and I raise this every year, is I hate the oversplit. I can see no reason for it. There's no oversplits in any form of professional cricket. And I think the justifications that are given to say that it's what happens in the home counties is just not valid. That's not relevant to a lot of the clubs. If you're going up from tier 1, and tier 2, okay, maybe, but you only talk about 20 clubs tops there, and it's just not relevant to the rest of the league system, and it does not. It, as someone alluded to, it's just an unimaginative way of teams who have not done very well batting first to try and gain some kind of advantage over the team batting second who are trying to win the game. Why should you have 6 overs less to chase the same score? Try explaining that to the youngsters who watch it on TV. Why have we gone from 50-50 to an oversplit, and we're still trying to win the game in exactly the same way? Yeah, I'll stop my rant now, but that's just
different, aren't they?
Because if you played a 50-50, win, draw, lose, you'd bowl second every week.
Yeah,
that's why.
Yeah.
It gives the team the opportunity to bat first and make that difference. When you play at smaller grounds, Hall is a good example, or even Great Brickhill, where 6 overs makes a massive difference in the amount of runs you can score, and may make you either win or at least get the majority points from that. I guess this then threads back into the previous conversation about win, lose, draw cricket as to whether the league wants that. But personally, I think that's where I feel that the reasoning is behind the 6 over difference. And personally, I think it works well, because captains, if they've scored enough runs after 48, 49, 50 overs, will go, actually, that's enough. We'll give ourselves extra time to bowl
the idea of declaring and getting the extra overs, and no question about that. That's absolutely fine. If you're well enough ahead, why not give yourself the extra? I think that's not the thing. I think it's the idea that you prevent the team batting second getting as many overs in order to essentially chase the same score. It's an iniquity that isn't in.
But they've addressed that, Justin, with the draw points, because there've been situations now where teams batting second don't get within X amount of runs, but they win the draw points on the fact that they've got a greater run rate. So I think there's always something for the team batting.
Yeah, that is a relatively new thing. I think that's only come in the last season or two, and I think my aversion to the whole thing has been around for a lot longer than that. But yeah, perhaps there is the point thing is making up for it slightly. But I think teams go out to win a game. I think if you want to bat second, it's because you want to win the game. That's what cricket's about. Why should you be punished for trying to win the game batting second?
Well, not if you've won the toss and you're choosing to bat second, you're not being punished. You're making that decision for yourself, aren't you? You're saying, I back ourselves to get whatever they've got, given that there aren't the same fielding restrictions. I back ourselves to get whatever they've got in less overs.
Yeah, but in less overs, why is that supposed to be part of your calculation that we've got to do it? Well, that's not a cricket thing.
There's only less overs if you don't bowl them out.
Go back 15 or 20 years, there was a very strong feeling that there should be something to stop teams sticking in a team on winning the toss, setting very defensive fields, maybe no slip early on, and then just knocking the runs off. Now you might say, well, that's fair enough, but it was fairly unattractive cricket. And I can remember when there was a very strong movement to stop that sort of thing, and that's why this has come about. And I think if we change it, it would probably go back. The problem, as always, comes down to the imaginativeness of the captains. You know, that really we should be doing what Ian mentioned there is trying to declare before 50. And unfortunately, a lot of captains have lost sight of that because they're afraid of losing. But then again, they may not, surprisingly, really appreciate the winning bonus situation that's just been described.
I think, Justin, I'd like to just come back to your broader point about, yeah, fair enough in the ones in first and second division, because they're going up to the home counties and they need to be able to play that format. And that was the entire reason that we introduced win-lose cricket in the first place. Team ones went up to home counties and fed back straight away that they didn't know how to play win-lose cricket because they hadn't played it and they were getting absolutely hammered every week. So having it there for the teams that could be going into the home counties is a reason for having it in 1 and 2. The reason for having it in 3 and 4 is because those teams are aspirational about getting into divisions 1 and 2. And you don't want them going up and getting ejected out the back seat because they don't know how to play that format. And then it cascades down all the way. So
don't forget the second teams as well, Ian, because I've got players who 1 week might be playing in the home counties the next week.
Yeah. And equally, if their second teams in Divs 4 and 5, and their first teams in 1 or 2, they have to be able to again do that movement. Particularly the youngsters should be moving up at some point, and they need to be prepared.
I see what you guys are saying, but at the same time, we don't play the same format as the home counties. They play 110, as been said before. The over split is different. It's, you know, where do you draw your line?
Well, it's 110 and it's 60-50, isn't it? Proportionally, it's the same.
Proportionally, it's exactly the same.
Well, it's not. Yeah, but it's not the same. That's what I'm saying. Proportionally, it might be the same, but it isn't the same. So to say, you know, you've got to get used to playing a certain form of cricket because you're going to move up to home counties.
Well, actually,
you're not. You're not playing it. You're playing a different format when you move up.
Well, but Ian's point actually was that we introduced the win-lose cricket because that was a different format, not the win-lose-draw cricket.
Well, okay. But the talking about the over split is to say, well, you're not actually playing the over split when you move up. You're playing a slightly different over split when you move up. And also, I think part of the reason that the home counties had the over split was because they had earlier start times, and it was felt that teams who got inserted on a damp 11 o'clock Saturday morning were at a disadvantage, and therefore would have potentially longer overs to get over it. I think that was one of the arguments. But since
except that as Ian said, the format's been around forever. I mean, the Sevens Valley do the same. They actually play 48-52 or 52-48. So that's a slightly less of a split. But as Ian said, every league that I'm aware of that's playing win-lose-draw cricket has always had that type of difference.
Well, it's clearly regional because I'd never played in an oversplit league before I moved down to Oxfordshire.
Okay.
So I'd never. In fact, it was the first time I come across.
We could just go to timed cricket and then really see if the captains can work out.
You see if you can get someone to bowl 20. See if you can get someone to bowl 20 overs in the last hour.
In the last hour,
yeah. I'm not advocating we go back to 2 bowlers bowling 23 from each end either. So.
But don't forget, guys, in timed cricket, you have to bowl 20 overs in the last hour, and that's how league cricket started. I'm not advocating it, but you do have to bowl 20 overs in the last hour in timed cricket.
And I remember when we were trying to win games, you'd get 23 in by running between overs and whatever. It is possible if you try.
20-minute teas.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've got the opinions come in there. It's gone round and round a little bit in the washing machine, and I'll try and disseminate it out of the recording. But I'm happy to carry on if someone feels they've got something else they want to add to this part, but if not, okay, so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about something that's been mentioned earlier about new teams coming in, and about promotion relegation as well. Now, as we thought might happen, the combined league has provoked a lot of interest from outside of our current borders, and we have some applications coming in for 2022. 2 new clubs and 3 clubs that want to add an additional team. Now, our standard practice has always been with existing clubs, if we know their facilities, if they want to put an extra team in and they're confident that they can do it, that we would just accept them on the nod. With new clubs, obviously, there is some due diligence that we need to do, which we have done with the 2 that have applied. Now, one of the big objections, which Gary mentioned earlier, often to a new club coming in, was that, oh, you're going to put them in, but you're going to put them in Division 5, and we're all going to get relegated. It's going to be 8 down from this league, and it's ridiculous, and so on. So what we're looking at this season, or for next season, is rather than push all these clubs in, and a fair number of these teams will be coming in above Tier 8, and push a whole bunch of people down, what we're going to try to do is create a second Division 3. So we will have 3A and 3B. We will move more clubs up, which will create space to allow these clubs to come in and give us the opportunity to do all of the promotions that we promised, plus a little bit more in some areas, and 1 team from every division will be relegated. No more than 1. So everyone that should have gone up will go up. 1 or 2 teams could potentially go up as well. And what it will create is a more natural barrier between 4 and 5, because we would have 1 division in 1, 1 division in 2, 2 divisions in 3, 2 divisions in 4, 3 divisions all the way down. From there, when we were talking about 100 over cricket, that might then suddenly become the natural point to break it and say, well, 100 over cricket is where you have 2 divisions in a tier. 90 over cricket is where you have 3 divisions in a tier. Any thoughts, comments, worries, issues?
I think from Charlie's point of view, sort of touching one of the previous questions, I think we were generally in favour of Tier 5 staying with 100 overs. It does suit us as a second team to be playing the same formats as we would in a first team further up. But at the same time, I think if there was sufficient promotion and relegation between 3 and 4, 4 and 5, 5 and 6, I think teams will find their levels, and wherever you draw the line at having 90 or 100 overs, I think would be a reflection of how good your team is in those tiers. And so I don't think we'd strongly be against that at all, if that was the situation as you've described. As long as there was sufficient teams going up and down to find their own levels, and we've seen, it's already been said that. After the amalgamations, there's always going to be teams, misplaced too high or too low. I think if that continued with your expanded Tier 3, then I think people would find their levels fairly quickly, and I think that would be okay. Whether it's in a 90 or 100 would be secondary.
What was very interesting when the final tables came out is that I think 16 of the, sorry, not of the 17, of the 14 divisions where relegation is possible, 13 of them had 1 team woefully adrift. And above them, it was quite close and quite tight. And at that point, initially, we were talking 3 up, 3 down, and there might have been some excessive relegation. Now, this wasn't the plan, but it's a nice offshoot of it, that each of those 1 woefully adrift teams who probably really want to go down will go down. No one else is going to get hurt.
Ian, how will the promotion and relegation work if you've got, say, a 3A and 3B? Because at the moment, of course, the original provision was to relegate 4 teams from the old Div 3, which felt a bit harsh. But then how would that work at, say, in Division 2 if you've got 3A, 3B?
Well, the reason I won't go into specifics, and the reason I won't go into specifics is because we still need to get confirmation from the HCP, from the home counties that Cumber will go up and so on, and that no one will come down, and that affects it to some extent. But what we will probably end up with is 1 will come down from 3, because the bottom of 3 are well adrift. The remainder will survive, and then we'll be joined by probably the top halves of 4, which will then be made up from the top halves of 5, and it will all just move up, and we just go 1 down in each case. If any team comes to us and says, look, you know, you're not going to relegate us, but we really want to go down, we would do.
Sorry, my question's more around the next year. So you've got that.
All right, okay.
You got that structure. You get 3A and 3B.
Yeah.
If you're in Division 2, how many teams go down and how many teams go up?
We haven't decided it. We haven't discussed it in full, but the momentum is towards the break between 3 and 2 will be significant. Therefore, you will have to win 3 to get into 2, and 2 will come down. Now, the situation that we had between 4 and 3 and between 5 and 4, when we looked at it again, certainly between 5 and 4, where we were saying the top team will go up and the best placed second team, that started to look like a mistake, that we should have been a bit more generous with promotion, but that would have then meant relegating more. I think 4 teams coming out of a 10-team division is too much. So the view would be, and by putting in 2 tiers of 2, the pyramid doesn't suddenly sharpen the way it does at the moment. It kind of smooths a little bit. So you have 3 leagues feeding into 2, 2 leagues feeding into 2, 2 leagues feeding into 1. But inevitably there has to be a pinch point, and that pinch point will be 3 to 2, which feels a little more appropriate than 4 to 3. But you will have to win Division 3 to get into Division 2. Now, that's not confirmed. That's kind of where the cricket committee are at the moment. And, you know, we want to get some feedback on that as well before we go to a final decision. Yeah, I'm just seeing David Beck's message there that Cumber have been accepted. I had home counties on today asking for their pitch marks. So I guess just a bit of due diligence to go through, but it looks likely that Cumber will go up. No one will come down, and that then allows us to go 1 down all the way down.
Good news, Pete. You're still there.
Pete, he seems to have gone.
Ian, if I could just say a few words about our club. We missed promotion to Division 4 by 3 points. And the problem with Division 5, 3 sections going up into 2, of course, you know, 4 is that's fine, and the best placed second team goes up. The only other way I can see to approach this is the bottom 3 teams from Div 4 come down. I obviously that's a change the other way, but I think you need to have a look at that. The upper leagues, I think, certainly 1, 2, 3, the clubs in at that level have to take their chances. They're either good enough to play in the division above, or they're not good enough. Because somebody mentioned aspirational cricket, we're talking about really serious clubs, and that's part and parcel of the game, I think. But I think you need, as a league, to have a look at that situation.
Well, so the creation of this second tier 3 will move more clubs up and will create the space to rectify that issue between 5 and 4. So instead of just 4 clubs going up from 5, it could be as many as 10. So that anyone who has finished top 3 is in a very good position for a reconstructed league. Now, the only other issue that I've got on my list is umpires. I know we've talked at some length about umpires on leg side wides and so on, but we have had comments about club umpiring versus panel umpiring versus neutral umpiring, etc. And I'd be interested to hear. And there are 2 things here. One is people's opinions, and the other is the logistic possibility of achieving those. And I think we have to take account of both equally, because it's all very well having a grand theory for it, but if we don't have the resource or the ability to do it, then that becomes slightly unachievable. But what were the thoughts? And I know the OCA came from neutral umpires everywhere. Cherwell has never insisted on neutral umpires. We're happy to get non-playing umpires into the game. And we sort of try to balance that off a little bit. But any thoughts, input, ideas?
At our level in Division 8, absolutely no problem with club umpires against panel umpires. Very, very little difference, both very good. But what my players were unhappy about is quite a large number of games where we take a proficient club umpire, but the opposition, particularly when they're at home, don't have an umpire. So we have to provide then a square leg whilst we're batting in addition to our club umpire.
Yeah.
Very often where the home team has got 3 or 4 people watching and supporting who you think would be perfectly capable of being a club umpire at that level. But there just didn't seem enough incentive because they've only got to then give £15 contribution, which is less than we're paying our club umpire anyway.
Right. Yep.
So I'd like to see more incentivization for an umpire to represent your team at all levels. And I know it's hard when you've got 3 or 4 teams, but I'm just passing on the gripes of our players that they're then having to stand at square leg when we've already provided a club umpire.
Yeah. Sure. So by incentive, mean points?
I'm not sure the points is overly effective, to be honest, Ian.
Okay. What would be?
I'm not sure. I don't know. I wouldn't want to see teams penalised financially, but it seems a little bit wrong that they're paying less to not have an umpire than they would to have one, if that makes sense.
Okay. We'll certainly look at that. Let's just change the numbers.
No issue with consistent favoritism of umpires. I'll say. I think the application of the laws and interpretation of the laws was variable, but certainly no favoritism.
Ian, if I might say, sorry to bore everyone to death, but a qualified umpire, but I mainly umpire Chisley Cricket Club as a club umpire. And in my experience, the club umpires do as good a job as the panel umpires. We have a panel umpire, but unfortunately he's not been available this year. But and we also provide a club umpire for the second team. And in my experience, that they are just as impartial as panel umpires. In fact, I would say sometimes perhaps more so. But I have been pretty impressed in 5A, which is where we were this season, with the standard of umpiring. And I would like to put on record very little dissension from the players at all. Just get on with the game. That's the decision, and no backchat or anything.
Okay, so it's good to hear. Any other thoughts on the umpiring side? Okay, well, that one was quieter than I thought it was going to be. But...
Yeah, could I just pick up on Ian's point there from the disciplinary point of view? Obviously, we've doubled the amount of teams virtually, and yet, in effect, the amount of reports we've had is half what we had pre-COVID. So that's an encouraging sign, in my view.
Yeah.
We had 16 reports, I think, this year, player reports, whereas pre-COVID season, we had 26, 27, with half the teams that we've got today. Now, obviously, we wouldn't like any reports, but it's a movement in the right direction, certainly.
My own experience of playing this year was, and I had this conversation with a couple of opponents as well, but given the year that we'd had the year previously, it was just good to be back playing cricket, and we all really need to be just a little bit nicer to each other, and that seemed to carry through a lot of the games that we played in. The spirit of the game, I think, was better. There's still plenty going on the pitch, but it stayed on the pitch, and the same what as Gary mentioned, more teams stuck around for beer and a chat, and it was a much more social game. Just my own personal experience. Okay. Gentlemen, I don't want to cut you off if you've got anything else to add, but we've certainly covered everything that was on my list. If there's anything that you've got on your list that you'd like to raise, now's the time. Yeah, James?
Yeah, quick one from me. And Ian, you know a little bit about this because I've been corresponding with you, but around the player eligibility rules in weeks 17 and 18. And I just think we'd like to review that. I didn't disagree with the principle of what the league was trying to put forward, but I do think that perhaps needs reviewing.
What way, James?
Well, they had a rule, or there is a rule, that you can't play any players in weeks 17 and 18 that have played the predominance of games in, say, the first team, and we're a second team in this example. We had two players, one was played 8, one had played 7, and they played 6 second team games. So it would have meant that they would have played either an equal number, or if in one player's situation, more Cherwell games than home counties games. So I just wonder whether we need to review that. I get the principle behind it, i.e. you don't want to just be able to stick good players from the first team into the second team, but instead of it being half the sort of performances, it perhaps needs to be, say, 2/3 to 1/3. And obviously the rules are slightly different for home counties league teams to what they are for Cherwell teams.
I mean, absolutely, we're happy to review. I think I'd throw this back to where we did it 2-3 years ago with the home counties. And in actual fact, the rule that was in place then was almost exactly the rule that you're describing. And they all said that's not fair. It needs to be different. And so we came up with that one. But we also said to the home counties, and I'll say this to any of the teams in the home counties now, if you have an idea, please give it to us. And you know, anything that you think is fair, we're happy to put in front of the clubs and say.
Yeah. So maybe I'll sort of I'll sketch something out for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had a situation where 3 players, including a 15-year-old boy, wasn't able to play any league cricket the last 2 weeks of the season. But I'm not sure that's really the right message when you explain to a young lad and his dad that he's not going to be able to play any league cricket for anyone this season.
Yeah, I think there is sympathy there, James. That picking up again on a point there, the downside is the home counties clubs / teams are in the minority. And so you can understand, perhaps, I'm not saying it's right, but you can understand why the clubs didn't want it.
They are, but at the same time, I think you've got to look at the rule, because if I take your point. If it was a player that played 10 first team games, we were trying to draft him in for the last 2, and he'd only played 1 second team game, then totally get it.
Yeah.
It's not right. But in the situation we had where these were really fringe players who'd only played in the 1s, not the 2s, and I'm sure if Aston Rowans and 1 or 2 of the other home counties clubs are on here, they'd probably say something similar. But yeah. I'm happy to put something forward, and I might even go around the other home counties league clubs just to see what they think. But I appreciate it's not for everyone on this call. But
no, but it is an important rule, and it affects the whole principle of playing down, goes all the way down the divisions.
Yeah,
and we're happy to look at.
I respected the league's decision. I didn't necessarily agree with it, but the rules are the rules, and I wanted to get it right. Yeah. But it just meant a difficult conversation with some of the younger players and saying, "Well, I'm sorry, you're not going to play." Yeah. So anyway.
The only thing I would say though, James, is it'd be great if you can frame something that's better than what we've got, but I promise you I can give you 2 concrete examples of the rules being abused when they were not as specific as they are now. So
probably,
we don't want to go back to that.
The issue with any rule is that at the extremes, as you described, if you've got one that's played 10 and 1, then that's clearly the rule is right. Any rule comes into debate in the margin, and whatever the rule is, there'll be a margin, and that's the conversation we have every year with home counties teams, and in some cases with teams, multiple team clubs who are trying to want to play players down, and it's at the margins, the obvious ones. So, I mean, I had one come in and said, "Oh, this guy's not been playing very well in the 14 games he's played in the 1s. Can he play in the 2s?" I said, "No, he can't. I'm sorry." And it just so happened their 1s were rock middle of the table and their 2s were fighting for promotion. Don't blame him for asking, but it's our job to say no. So when it's extreme, it's easy. But when it comes to the margin, there will always be a debate every year. But by all means, please come with something. And if we as a committee look at it and say that's not unreasonable, then we will put it on the AGM papers. You want us to go out and get 22 clubs to support it, we'll put it on, and then the clubs can vote on it. Yeah, and actually, I think although you are in the minority, the majority of clubs won't care. So if it's fair, if you don't have a team above Division 4, they won't care, and they'll just kind of go, yeah, whatever. Yeah. The ones that it affects, if it looks fair, they'll go, yeah, fair enough. Because if you're in Division 3, that might be you in 2 years' time. So you've got to think about it. But yeah, please feel free to draft up, and by all means, please talk to the other home counties, because if you've got consensus, that makes sense.
And also, James, if you'd like to give me a ring, I'm happy to talk it through with you.
Great. No, thank you, everyone, and thank you for the forum. Very good.
Can I just add a little bit onto that one?
Yeah, sure.
I think I can't really speak for the home counties issue. I think that's slightly different, but certainly we were very grateful at the end of the season, week 17-18, for being able to talk to Gary and to discuss availability of certain players, because it meant we could get a game on for our 3rd team. That was what it was about for us. If you got people dropping out and whatever else, it was so important for us to be able to discuss it and say, can we play these players? And it was the difference for us to getting a 3rd team out on the last 2 weekends of the season. So I think we're very grateful that there is a little bit of flexibility in the system.
Well, it's built into the rules, and I mean, when Gary was away on holiday, I was basically picking up 3 or 4 emails a day, which made me appreciate what he's doing, from people saying, can we have an exemption for this guy? Can we have an exemption for that guy? And I would say probably 2/3 of them, we said, yeah, that's fair enough.
I think it's probably at least 2/3, but as Ian said, there was the odd occasion of this person's never played in the second team, can he play next week? That's a slightly different ask, but generally there was quite a lot of exceptions made, which I think is fair. Didn't have that many games not played at the end of the season, which was nice. The home counties one it's slightly more tricky, but okay, we're obviously happy to look at something that suits everybody.
Okay, gentlemen, if there's nothing else anyone wants to raise,
Yeah, got one. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were waving goodbye. Go on then.
No, I've been trying to get your attention for a little while.
About 15
Just
years.
it's a question on rules, really. And I think it's one for Nielsen. Just what's the ruling if, as has happened once this year, I know of, if the pitch is not playable at the start of the normal start time, but there is quite a good prospect of it being played later in the afternoon, by which I don't necessarily mean in a quarter of an hour's time, but maybe you get a 3 o'clock start. If the away team wants to go home and their umpire's quite keen to go home, but the home team believes that the conditions will be suitable for play later on, what prevails? Do both umpires have to agree? What's the rule on that?
Well, the first point is the umpires only get a say once the ground authority has handed it over to them. So if the ground authority is saying you can't play, the umpires aren't really going to.
Okay, let's say the ground authority is okay for.
If the ground authority says we think there's a decent chance of getting the start around about say 3 p.m, then the umpires should say, okay, you know the ground better than we do. It's likely we're going to be able to start around about 3. If we do, that can that can become a game of however many overs, and the away team shouldn't be walking away in those circumstances.
I think the problem occurs, and I'm talking obviously in the lower divisions here, where there isn't really a ground authority as such. There may be, and in effect, it may well be that the guy who's looked after the ground isn't there on the day, or is indeed a player for the home side who's saying, look, I know this area, I know how the wind travels, I know how this dries, we can get a game on. And, a team who may have a vested interest in not playing simply really doesn't want to hang about. Because, we all know very well that on it, you can have days where at 12 o'clock, it doesn't look too good, but actually, you're okay by 2 o'clock, 2:30.
Yeah, and there's got to be some sense about it. And even if you haven't got any umpires, then in that case, the 2 captains are in place of the umpires. I think it would probably have to go to committee, but I think the committee would take a very dim view if the home team is saying, we think there's a decent chance we'll be able to play by whatever time, and the away team just says, no, not interested, we're going home. I think
that's basically a concession, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it's very hard to prove, though, isn't it? That's the problem. And if a team goes at 12, leaves, I don't know, at 1:30, when it still looks a bit grim, it can be, the proof is in the pudding 2 hours later. Obviously we've had one of these, which is why I'm bringing it up.
But if the umpires haven't called it off, then they've conceded, haven't they?
Yeah. In that instance, had I been the umpire on the day, I would be saying, look, we have information which says there's a decent chance we'll be playing by whatever time. I mean, I might go against that if it's actually chucking it down with rain. I've got an app which says it's going to be chucking it down with rain all afternoon, and actually you guys are deluding yourself. That might come into it, but assuming you're not, then you want to play cricket, don't you? So it would constitute a refusal to play.
Yeah.
I always say to the two teams involved, according to the league rules, we're limited. We can play a 20 over game for a result. This means that the latest time I can start a game is this time. I am here as an umpire until this time. The only way I can go home earlier is if the two captains come to me and say, we have agreed that given the weather forecast, all the conditions, that we are not going to be able to carry on, in which case I concede to their wish to abandon the game. But as far as I'm concerned, if they don't, we're there till whatever the specified time is.
That's very clear, and thanks for that. That helps a lot. I think I've got one more question then, is if one umpire says, I think this game is playable, and the other umpire says, well, I don't think it's worth hanging around. What, is that just sort of bad luck? How do we resolve that? Is an umpire, let's put it another way, is an umpire obliged to stay until both captains agree that the game can't be played?
Well, I think he's morally obliged to stay, yes. In terms of you're on the boundary, can we go out and play? Then both umpires have to agree. If either umpire says it's not playable, then you don't play. Those are laws of cricket. But if it's 1 o'clock and one umpire saying it looks like the weather's going to clear up and the ground dries quickly, the other one saying, no, I think it's going to be chucking down all afternoon, I want to go home, then that guy is in the wrong. He shouldn't be, he shouldn't be, he's basically asking for his 45 quid to do bugger all. And so
okay, that's answers as clear as it can be, Neil. So thank you, Brian, as well. That's maybe helpful in a future situation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Only a quick one, and I can imagine this is as exasperating for Gary as it is for us. Is could the deadline be tightened up for submitting scorecards? We're used to putting them in by.
I'd make it 8 o'clock on a Saturday evening.
Yeah, I agree. Exasperating when you're with a away team and you've got some of your batsmen have got runs or your bowlers done well, and having to wait till Tuesday night to see the scorecard is infuriating.
Still trying to score the game at 8 o'clock.
I didn't know who'd won the league until Sunday morning.
Well, quite, and that I thought was particularly poor form actually from one particular team in that instance. That was Sarah Grapes. I think there were 53 scorecards that came in late, and there were no weeks after the first 3 weeks when nearly every game was rained off, when everything was in on time. Now, what I have looked at some of the offenders, and there are serial offenders on the list, and I might produce some league tables because we do have a provision for points deductions if you're late. And I don't think it would have affected any promotion spots, but I will double check that. And we need to issue reminders at least to those teams that actually, if we'd have applied our rules strictly in terms of results and scorecards coming on time, you might have got promoted. But the scorecards were a particular pain. I spent all my Tuesday evenings, Wednesdays, and last week Thursday chasing clubs to put a scorecard in. If it was. It's 5 o'clock on a Monday evening, and the other bizarre thing is how many people, about 4 scorecards were put in this afternoon just before 5 o'clock. So presumably those people thought, well, I'll wait until the very last minute, then I'll do it, which just seems to me bizarre.
I think it's harder for those. I think it's harder for those teams that don't have a scorer, Gary. In my experience, we're lucky we have a scorer, and he's actually submitted scorecards and fixtures for the opposition. When it's been their home game, it's hard for those clubs that don't have one. I have some sympathy for
it. Absolutely, and this year obviously was slightly harder for that as well. But is there any difference between doing it on Monday evening or Tuesday evening from a point of view of having to do it? You've either got the scorebook by then or you haven't.
A series of panicked WhatsApps in the group going, "Have you done it? Have you done it? Have you done
it?" Yeah. We will next year be coming in much harder on these types of compliance issues. And it won't, whereas this season there was quite a lot of, come on, you need to get that, don't do that again, because we could take points off you. Next year it will be, you've just lost 2 points, 5 points, whatever, because your card didn't come in, or because you didn't remark your crease, or because you didn't do this, or because you didn't do that. And it's, it's all there. None of those things are likely to change in the rules, so everybody's had it for a year. And we've always, I know Cherwell League at one time had a reputation of being run on fines. We haven't fined anyone this year on anything because we are a firm believer that if you grab them by the points, they react much quicker. So next year there will be much less tolerance, and as a result, much less frustration and work for Gary and I. We will just whip the points off, and we may even just whip them off and not even tell you why, and you can come and ask. I won't say because you didn't do that, that, oh, you could have warned me. Yeah, I did all last year.
Is there anything that can be done to make it easier to submit these scorecards? I mean,
well, yeah, you score
a
on
lot
a
of teams.
laptop.
Well, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
is that extended all the way down? Can we?
I mean,
Sometimes there's a difficulty uploading them from whichever scoring app you're using. Can we? People talk about Play Cricket compatibility.
I'll talk about that in a moment. But
yeah. I mean, is there anything we can do to make this easier? Rather,
well, we've given laptops to every team down to tier 6. So that, and there's a lot of teams above that who are not submitting their scorecards on time or using their laptop in many cases. So there are teams below that who've chosen to use their own laptop, and the database is available. So any team can score on a laptop if they want to. The scoring software is free. The trouble with using the Play Cricket scoring app is that you have to have all your players registered in Play Cricket as well. And if you do and your opposition don't, when you submit your scorecard, there'll be 11 unknowns on the other side. And I, for one, I spend enough time sorting out unknowns as it is. I'm not going to be sorting out thousands more. So unless we can resolve that particular issue, and I've spoken to the ECB a couple of years ago now about that, and they're not very forthcoming on anything. The ECB scoring app relies on registrations in Play Cricket. And that's, some clubs don't use Play Cricket, some do, but that would create an extra overhead. And you have to be registered with exactly the same name. You'd be surprised how many are differently named between the two systems, even when they do exist in both. So I'm looking at it, and I did it a couple of years ago. I shall look at it again over the winter, but it will create a massive headache with unknown players because they're not in Play Cricket.
There is no reason why you can't.
We have no way of matching them up.
There is no reason why you can't download TCS onto your own laptop and score the
Anybody's
game.
laptop.
All the databases are available.
A number of teams have done that lower down, and they get on fine. It actually, I mean, at the end of the day, yes, it's a bit of a bind to do it manually, but actually, you're talking about 9 games over a season, and it takes you maybe 20 minutes. It's not as onerous as it might be. And you still got to do it on Tuesday if you haven't done it on Monday. So, I'm quite sure, taking the point of can we move the deadline forward? I would love to, because we can get all those things out. Team of the week sent out this evening, actually, when the last scorecard came in. Whilst we've been talking, all those things can come out earlier if the scorecards are all there, but we can't do those until we've got all the scorecards, or somebody, particularly from an opposition team, is going to be missing off those things. So I'm quite happy to move it forward. We actually moved it from Thursday this year. It used to be Thursday, and that was way too generous. But yeah, if there's a swell for Mondays, that would get my vote.
Sunday night.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's surprising how many get done on a Monday morning. Clearly, a lot of people going to work and do it. So I'd be reluctant to change that bit too much.
I am quite
prepared.
prepared.
Ones, I suspect.
I am quite prepared to. I'm quite prepared to allow for the possibility of Mondays, but I think Gary's right that Monday at 5 o'clock is plenty late enough.
It's no different from Tuesday at 5 o'clock at the end of the day, is it? So, but yeah, there were 53 scorecards in late, and results weren't too bad. There were still 24 of them.
And not all have the keepers or captains marked either.
No.
Yes, we know that.
Yeah, we're on that one. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point, and I'd much prefer them to be earlier rather than later. We've got enough to do without chasing teams with automated emails, manual emails, and oh yeah, I didn't read that one, or the school book's gone on holiday, or whatever it might be.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for your input. I will, at some point, probably at the end of this week, get this recording uploaded to YouTube, and I'll send out the link so that you can pass it around to other members of the clubs, etc. as I will do with tomorrow's forum and next Tuesday's forum and Wednesday's forum. And probably, I think we'll just have a forum every week, Tuesday and Wednesday, because we've got nothing else to do.
Any chance of a recorded highlights, Ian? You know, a short version.
Yeah, because nothing I would prefer to do is sit here for 4 hours and edit this.
Quite.
No, you can have it all or nothing.
I think that was a volunteer, Ian, to do the job. Can I ask if we know who Sanjay was, who's the only person who didn't log in? He was here only here for the first half hour. It could be Sunningwell, Cumnor or OBN.
Well, it won't be Sunningwell. The invite for today was A to C. So
it must have come now.
It might have come.
He didn't last long.
Oh yeah, that's a captain, isn't it?
Oh, could be. Yeah, could be. Okay, gentlemen, I've tried a few times. Now I'm going to kick you all off.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, gents. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Cheers.